Hi, everyone, and welcome to segment 3 of today's Jane Eyre Readathon. If I'm looking flustered and like I've just cried for half an hour, that is because I have. We finished up a very emotional reading with Jane and Rochester having a special connection in our previous segment. I will cry this entire time too, but I will be off camera working a swing. So I'll just come back in at the end and share my very strong feelings about this novel that I love so much. I am so excited for this reading. We are doing chapters 24 through 27. And this, even though I am going to emphasize the wonderful performances of our readers throughout this, we're not actually here for them. We are here for the Honresfield Library. That is why we are doing this readathon. There was a collection of once lost manuscripts, documents, letters, diary papers, books belonging to different authors with their annotations that were set to go to public auction in July. If they had gone to public auction, they would have been purchased by the highest bidder, which I'm sure you can imagine is not going to be a museum or library. Thankfully, the auction was put on hold, and all of these items were offered to the Friends of the National Libraries, which is a coalition of various author-related museums and libraries in the UK. And now they have to raise £15 million to purchase these items and distribute them to their appropriate museums. We are helping out by contributing toward the £100,000 public crowdfunding campaign. If you want to donate financially, we would be so grateful for anything you can give, whether it's $1 or £1 or a penny. And there are links in our previous videos to our GoFundMe page and also to the Friends of the National Library's Give Big campaign. These are available in the links for all of our old videos. I will add those to the descriptions of our current video after. It just takes a little while for me to go back and edit the video. So we do appreciate all of your help, all of your support, spreading the word, telling your friends, watching our videos, all of that helps. And it brings literal treasures from the pages of Jane Eyre back to their home in the Bronte Parsonage in Haworth. In our last segment, we got to see Bewick's History of British Birds for the second time in Jane Eyre. And that is one of the books that will be going back to the Bronte Parsonage if the Friends of the National Libraries earn their £15 million. It's a wonderful treasure. It has annotations from their father, Patrick, about which birds are edible and which ones are not. And it would be incredible for fans of Jane Eyre and of all of the Brontes to see that replaced in the home where it once lived. In addition to that, before I introduce our participants, I do have to say happy birthday to Branwell Bronte. I'm wearing my Team Branwell button, which I purchased at the Bronte Parsonage. Branwell is the often overlooked brother. He would have been 204 if he had miraculously lived until today. He did unfortunately die young, like all of the Bronte siblings. He was also a very experienced writer. His stuff is not read as much as that of the sisters, just because it's not packaged nicely as novels. If you can ever get a hold of Branwell's juvenilia, it is a lot of fun to read. There are pirates and genii and cannibalism and everything you would expect a teenage boy to have written about circa 1830. So it's a lot of fun. I do recommend reading his stuff and not just dismissing him as the brother of the more famous sisters, but taking a serious look into his life. There are different publications of his juvenilia that I'm sure you can find at the Bronte Parsonage when you go there to visit and see the Bewick's History of British Birds that you helped bring home there. So thank you, everyone. You can turn on your cameras now if you want to. I'm going to call on each of you to participate by introducing yourselves. And then I will cue Stephanie when it's time for her to start reading. Bill, you are my first person who I'm going to introduce, so please tell us a bit about yourself.
My name is Bill Heller. I am coming to you from New York City. I'm in Queens right now. And not in a tent somewhere. This is a sheet. By way of introduction, I am the creator of ShakespeareTeacher.com, and I invite anybody who's interested in the Brontes to go and check out ShakespeareTeacher.com, which has nothing to do with the Brontes, but it has resources for Shakespeare reading groups. It has family trees for the history plays and some creative writing of mine. Want to thank Amber for inviting me to come and read for Rochester today, and happy birthday to Branwell.
Thank you. And there is so much Shakespeare in the Brontes, and especially in Jane Eyre. So, Bill, you will have fun looking for it. And if some of you are like, I don't get that reference, it might be a Shakespeare reference. So go and look at Bill's website. In our previous session, Rochester said that some noise was a rehearsal for Much Ado About Nothing. So it's a pretty explicit reference. We also had an allusion to the hags from the Scottish play earlier. So the Brontes loved Shakespeare. Thank you, Bill. Next up, Stephanie C. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm coming to you from New York City, Upper West Side. I love the Brontes. I read Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights in my teens. And then as soon as I could put money together in my early 20s, I went to Haworth and walked in the rooms. It was extraordinary. And right now, I'm a novelist. I've published 5 novels, and I am writing a novel about a secret love of Emily Bronte, and I hope it turns out well. So I'm so thrilled to be here today.
Thank you. And there are a lot of Emily fans who have been reaching out to us, so hopefully they will like that. Yeah. Up next, Allie, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I'm Alice, but I go by Allie Tufel, and I'm calling from Oakland, California. I'm a New Yorker who's just kind of stranded out here for now. I just have a lifelong love affair with the Brontes. I'm an editor by trade, nonfiction editor, and a few years ago, I did a pilgrimage to Haworth, and it was probably like the most exciting trip I've ever taken, just walking through the streets of Haworth, you know, walking on the moors, going to the parsonage. And I absolutely need to go back. And I'm really excited to be here, and I thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you. And everyone who's like, I really want to go to Haworth, if you become Bronte Society members, you get free admission. So I recommend looking into that. They have options for international membership as well. Up next is Jillian.
Hi, I am Gillian Bagwell, actually. That's okay. There's a lot of Jillians, but I'm a Gillian. These days, I am mostly a historical novelist. You can find me at gillianbagwell.com. I am thrilled to be here. I have also spent a lot of time in theater as a professional actress, director, and producer. I founded the Pasadena Shakespeare Company and ran it for 10 years, producing 37 shows. I've been in Much Ado. I've produced it. I produced it twice, directed it once, been in it once, produced the Scottish play twice, a lot of other stuff. So I have seen the National Theater's wonderful production of Jane Eyre, but I haven't actually read it, so I'm going to have to rectify that situation. And I have not been to Haworth, and I look forward to getting to do that. Oh, I'm sitting here in Berkeley, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Thank you, and I love your outfit already. That's fantastic. Thank you for joining us. And so next we have Katrina, who we also met yesterday.
That you did. Yeah, I was here yesterday reading Jane. Today I will be Mrs. Fairfax and a couple odd bodies around Rochester's estate. I am originally from England, hence this thing that comes out. It's not just for Jane Eyre, but a great way to use it. But I am based in New York City, and I'm a professional actress here. And my fun Bronte connection is I've actually done 2 plays about the Bronte sisters, the last of which was the last piece I did before the shutdown. And it took Anne Bronte's writing, her poems, her letters, her journal entries, her novels, and kind of arranged them to tell the story of her life. And it was produced actually with the American chapter of the Bronte Society, as well as the New York Public Library and Kaleidoscopes. So I have a big place in my heart for all things Bronte.
That's fantastic. I'm going to wear my Team Anne button tomorrow.
Through and through.
So thank you. Next, we have Monica.
Hi, I'm Monica Phillips. I'm in Arlington, Texas, which is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And I'm a youth librarian at a public library, so I am not a professional anything except maybe the hokey pokey. So, which my husband says I get paid for, which is true. So it's not a bad way to make a living. And I love Jane Eyre. I like retellings of Jane Eyre, but I really, really love the original Jane Eyre. And I think my Bronte connection is through Amber. So, and I haven't been to Haworth, which I will put on my bucket list and become a member so I can get in free. So thank you, Amber, for letting me join this wonderful cast of wonderful people. I'm just so in awe of everyone. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. And last but not least, we have Stephanie M.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Lynn Mason, and I'm coming to you from New York City. I'm a professional actress up until the shutdown. Jane Eyre was the first like adult grown-up book that I read at 10 years old. And so it's always held a super, super special place in my heart. And to be able to to read Jane a little bit today I'm just absolutely tickled pink. So thank you so much for having me, Amber.
Thank you so much for coming and joining us. So we are about to start. I do have to give a bit of a disclaimer for all of you watching at home. We do have, actually, I'm just confirming your parts right now. Okay, so we do have a highlighted section like this. It shows up. This is what we're reading off of. And everyone has a different script. I did cut these myself. So there is going to be the potential for messing up. We are starting with chapter 24 and going to chapter 27. I hope you all know your parts, or not know your parts like know your parts, but know your parts like which one you're reading. Because I saw that my list isn't actually uploading right now. So as long as you know who you're supposed to be and tell me, then we should be fine. Any questions as we're going, put them in the chat. We're going to start out with Stephanie C as the narrator. And whenever you are ready, Stephanie C, go ahead. If there's an emergency, put it in the chat, or just come on and say, stop a minute, and I will help you. So
Okay.
Go ahead. Thank you.
All right. As I rose and dressed, I thought over what had happened and wondered if it were a dream. I could not be certain of the reality till I had seen Mr. Rochester again and heard him renew his words of love and promise. While arranging my hair, I looked at my face in the glass and felt it was no longer plain. There was hope in its aspect and life in its color, and my eyes seemed as if they had beheld the fount of fruition and borrowed beams from the luscious ripple. I'd often been unwilling to look at my master because I feared he could not be pleased at my look, but I was sure I might lift my face to his now and not cool his affection by its expression. I took a plain but clean and light summer dress from my drawer and put it on. It seemed no attire had ever so well become me, because none had I ever worn in so blissful a mood. I was not surprised when I ran down the hall to see that a brilliant June morning had succeeded to the tempest of the night, and to feel through the open glass door the breathing of a fresh and fragrant breeze. Nature must be gladsome when I was so happy. A beggar woman and her little boy, pale, ragged objects both, were coming up the walk, and I ran down and gave them all the money I happened to have in my purse, some 3 or 4 shillings. Good or bad, they must partake of my jubilee. The rooks cawed, and little birds sang, and nothing was so merry or as musical as my own rejoicing heart. Mrs. Fairfax surprised me by looking out of the windows with a sad countenance and saying gravely, "Miss Eyre, will you come to breakfast?" During the meal, she was quiet and cool, but I could not undeceive her then. I must wait for my master to give explanations, and so must she. Ate what I could, and then I hastened upstairs. I met Adele leaving the schoolroom.
Where are you going? It is time for lessons.
Mr. Rochester has sent me away to the nursery.
Where is he?
In there.
Pointed to the apartment she had left, and I went in, and there he stood.
Come and bid me good morning.
I gladly advanced, and it was not merely a cold word now, or even a shake of the hand that I received, but an embrace and a kiss. It seemed natural, it seemed genial to be so well loved, so caressed by him.
Jane, you look blooming and smiling and pretty, truly pretty this morning. Is this my pale little elf? Is this my mustard seed, this little sunny-faced girl with a dimpled cheek and rosy lips, the satin-smooth hazel hair and the radiant hazel eyes?
I had green eyes, Peter, but you must excuse the mistake. For him they were new-dyed, I suppose.
It is Jane Eyre, sir.
Soon to be Jane Rochester. In 4 weeks, Janet, not a day more. Do you hear that?
I did, and I could not quite comprehend it. It made me giddy. Feeling the announcement sent through me was something stronger than was consistent with joy, something that smote and stunned. It was, I think, almost fear.
You blushed and now you are white, Jane. What is that for?
Because you gave me a new name, Jane Rochester, and it seems so strange.
Yes, Mrs. Rochester, young Mrs. Rochester, Fairfax Rochester's girl bride.
It can never be, sir. It does not sound likely. Human beings never enjoy complete happiness in this world. I was not born for a different destiny to the rest of my species. To imagine such a lot befalling me is a fairy tale, a daydream.
Which I can and will realize. I shall begin today. This morning I wrote to my banker in London to send me certain jewels he has in his keeping, heirlooms for the ladies of Thornfield. In a day or two I hope to pour them into your lap, for every privilege, every attention shall be yours that I would accord a peer's daughter, if about to marry her.
Oh, sir, never rain jewels. I don't like to hear them spoken of. Jewels for Jane Eyre sounds unnatural and strange. I would rather not have them.
I will myself put the diamond chain around your neck and the circlet on your forehead, which it will become. For nature at least has stamped her patent of nobility on this brow, Jane, and I will clasp the bracelets on these fine wrists and load these fairy-like fingers with rings.
No, no, sir. I think of other subjects and speak of other things, and in another strain. Don't address me as if I were a beauty. I am your plain Quakerish governess.
You are a beauty in my eyes, and a beauty just after the desire of my heart, delicate and aerial.
Puny and insignificant, you mean? You are dreaming, sir, or you are sneering. For God's sake, don't be ironical.
I will make the world acknowledge you a beauty too.
He went on, while I became uneasy at the strain he had adopted, because I felt he was either deluding himself or trying to delude me.
I will attire my Jane in satin and lace, and she shall have roses in her hair, and I will cover the head I love best with a priceless veil.
And then you won't know me, sir, and I shall not be your Jane Eyre any longer, but an ape in a harlequin's jacket, a jay in borrowed plumes. I would as soon see you, Mr. Rochester, tricked out in stage trappings, as myself clad in a court lady's robe. And I don't call you handsome, sir, though I love you most dearly, far too dearly to flatter you. Don't flatter me.
He pursued his theme, however, without noticing my deprecation.
This very day I shall take you in the carriage to Millcote, and you must choose some dresses for yourself. I told you we shall be married in 4 weeks. The wedding is to take place quietly in the church down below yonder, and then I shall waft you away at once to town. After a brief stay there, I shall bear my treasure to regions nearer the sun, to French vineyards and Italian plains, and she shall see whatever is famous in old story and modern record. She shall taste, too, of the life of cities, and she shall learn to value herself by just comparison with others.
Shall I travel? And with you, sir?
You shall sojourn at Paris, Rome, and Naples. At Florence, Venice, and Vienna, all the ground I have wandered over shall be retrodden by you. Wherever I stamped my hoof, your self's foot shall step also. 10 years since I flew through Europe half mad with disgust, hate, and rage as my companions. Now I shall revisit it, healed and cleansed, with a very angel as my comforter.
I am not an angel, and I will not be one till I die. I will be myself. Mr. Rochester, you must neither expect nor exact anything celestial of me, for you will not get it, any more than I shall get it of you, which I do not at all anticipate.
What do you anticipate of me?
For a little while you will perhaps be as you are now, a very little while, and then you will turn cool, and then you will be capricious, and then you will be stern, and I shall have much ado to please you. But when you get well used to me, you will perhaps like me again. Like me, I say, not love me. I suppose your love will effervesce in 6 months or less. I have observed in books written by men that period assigned is the farthest to which a husband's ardor extends. Yet after all, as a friend and companion, I hope never to become quite distasteful to my dear master.
Distasteful and like you again. I think I shall like you again and yet again, and I will make you confess I do not only like, but love you with truth, fervor, constancy.
Yet are you not capricious, sir?
Two women who please me only by their faces. I am the very devil when I find out they have neither souls nor hearts, when they open to me a perspective of flatness, triviality, and perhaps imbecility, coarseness, and ill temper. But to the clear eye and eloquent tongue, to the soul made of fire and the character that bends but does not break, at once supple and stable, tractable and consistent, I am ever tender and true.
Have you ever experienced such a character, sir? Did you ever love such an one?
I love it now.
But before me, if I indeed in any respect come up to your difficult standard?
I never met your likeness, Jane. You please me and you master me. You seem to submit, and I like the sense of pliancy you impart. And while I am twining the soft silken skein around my finger, it sends a thrill up my arm to my heart. I am influenced, conquered, and the influence is sweeter than I can express. And the conquest I undergo has a witchery beyond any triumph I can win. Why do you smile, Jane? What does that inexplicable, that uncanny turn of countenance mean?
I was thinking, sir, you will excuse the idea, it was involuntary. I was thinking of Hercules and Samson with their charmers.
You were, you little elfish.
Hush, sir, you don't talk very wisely just now, any more than those gentlemen acted very wisely. However, had they been married, they would no doubt by their severity as husbands have made up for their softness as suitors, and so will you, I fear. I wonder how you will answer me a year hence, should I ask a favor it does not suit your convenience or pleasure to grant.
Ask me something now, Janet, the least thing. I desire to be entreated.
Indeed I will, sir. I have my petition all ready.
Speak, but if you look up and smile with that countenance, I shall swear concession before I know to what, and that will make a fool of me.
Not at all, sir. I ask only this. Don't send for the jewels, and don't crown me with roses. You might as well put a border of gold lace round that plain pocket handkerchief you have there.
I might as well gild refined gold. I know it. Your request is granted, then for the time. I will remand the order I dispatched to my banker, but you have not yet asked for anything. You have prayed a gift to be withdrawn. Try again.
Well then, sir, have the goodness to gratify my curiosity, which is much piqued on one point.
He looks disturbed.
What? What? Curiosity is a dangerous petition. It is, well, have I not taken a vow to accord any request?
But there can be no danger in complying with this, sir.
Utter it, Jane, but I wish that instead of a mere inquiry into perhaps a secret, it was a wish for half my estate.
Now, King Ahasuerus, what do I want with half your estate? Do you think I am a usurer seeking good investment in land? I would much rather have all your confidence. You will not exclude me from your confidence if you admit me to your heart?
You are welcome to all my confidence that is worth having, Jane, but for God's sake, don't desire a useless burden. Don't long for poison. Don't turn out a downright Eve on my hands.
Why not, sir? You have just been telling me how much you like to be conquered, and how pleasant over-persuasion is to you. Don't you think I had better take advantage of the confession, and begin and coax and entreat, even cry and be sulky if necessary, for the sake of a mere say of my power?
I dare you to any such experiment. Encroach, presume, and the game is up.
Is it, sir? You soon give in. How stern you look now. Your eyebrows have become as thick as my finger, and your forehead resembles what, in some very astonishing poetry, I once saw styled a blue-piled thunderloft. That will be your married look, sir, I suppose?
If that will be your married look, I, as a Christian, will soon give up the notion of consorting with a mere sprite or salamander. But what had you to ask? Thing, out with it.
There, you are less than civil now, and I like rudeness a great deal better than flattery. I had rather be a thing than an angel. This is what I have to ask. Why did you take such pains to make me believe you wished to marry Miss Ingram?
Is that all? Thank God it is no worse.
And now he unknit his black brows, looking down, smiling at me, and stroked my hair as if well pleased at seeing a danger averted.
I think I may confess, even though I should make you a little indignant, Jane, and I have seen what a fire spirit you can be when you are indignant. You glowed in the cool moonlight last night when you mutinied against fate and claimed your rank as my equal. Janet, by the by, it was you who made me the offer.
Of course I did. But to the point, if you please, sir. Miss Ingram?
Well, I feigned courtship of Miss Ingram because I wished to render you as madly in love with me as I was with you, and I knew jealousy would be the best ally I could call in for the furtherance of that end.
Excellent. Now you are small, not one whit bigger than the end of my little finger. It was a burning shame and a scandalous disgrace to act in that way. Did you think nothing of Miss Ingram's feelings, sir?
Her feelings are concentrated in one, pride, and that needs humbling. Were you jealous, Jane?
Never mind, Mr. Rochester. It is in no way interesting to you to know that. Answer me truly once more. Do you think Miss Ingram will not suffer from your dishonest coquetry? Won't she feel forsaken and deserted?
Impossible. When I told you how she, on the contrary, deserted me, the idea of my insolvency cooled or rather extinguished her flame in a moment.
You have a curious designing mind, Mr. Rochester. I am afraid your principles on some points are eccentric.
My principles were never trained, Jane. They may have grown a little awry for want of attention.
Once again, seriously, may I enjoy the great good that has been vouchsafed to me without fearing that anyone else is suffering the bitter pain I myself felt a while ago?
That you may, my good little girl. There is not another being in the world that has the same pure love for me as yourself. For I lay that pleasant unction unto my soul, Jane, a belief in your affection.
I turned my lips to the hand that lay on my shoulder. I loved him very much, more than I could trust myself to say, more than words had power to express.
Ask something more. It is my delight to be entreated and so to yield.
I was again ready with my request.
Communicate your intentions to Mrs. Fairfax, sir. She saw me with you last night in the hall and she was shocked. Give her some explanation before I see her again. It pains me to be misjudged by so good a woman.
Go to your room and put on your bonnet. I mean you to accompany me to Millcote this morning, and while you prepare for the drive, I will enlighten the old lady's understanding. Did she think, Janet, you had given the world for love and considered it well lost?
I believe she thought I had forgotten my station and yours, sir.
Station. Your station is in my heart and on the necks of those who would insult you now or hereafter. Go.
I was soon dressed, and when I heard Mr. Rochester quit Mrs. Fairfax's parlor, I hurried down to it. The old lady had been reading her morning portion of scripture, a lesson for the day. Her Bible was open before her, and her spectacles were upon it. Her occupation, suspended by Mr. Rochester's announcement, seemed now forgotten. Her eyes fixed on the blank wall opposite expressed the surprise of a quiet mind stirred by unwanted tidings. Seeing me, she roused herself. She made a sort of effort to smile and framed a few words of congratulations, but then the smile expired and the sentence was abandoned unfinished. She put on her spectacles, shut the Bible, and pushed her chair back from the table.
I hardly know what to say to you, Miss Eyre. I have surely not been dreaming, have I? Sometimes I half fall asleep when I'm sitting alone and fancy things that have never happened. It has seemed to me more than once when I've been in a doze that my dear husband, who died 15 years since, has come in and sat down beside me, and that I have even heard him call me by my name, Alice, as he used to. Now, can you tell me whether it is actually true that Mr. Rochester has asked you to marry him? Well, don't laugh at me, but I really thought he came in here 5 minutes ago and said that in a month he would be his wife.
He has said the same thing to me.
He has? Do you believe him? Have you accepted him?
Yes.
He looked at me bewildered.
I could never have thought it. He is a proud man. All the Rochesters were proud, and his father, at least, liked money. He too has always been called careful. He means to marry you.
He tells me so.
She surveyed my whole person. In her eyes, I read that they had there found no charm powerful enough to solve the enigma.
No doubt it is true, since you say so. How it will answer, I cannot tell. I really don't know. The quality of position and fortune is often advisable in such cases. And there are 20 years of difference in your ages. He might almost be your father.
No, indeed, Mrs. Fairfax. He is nothing like my father. No one who saw us together would suppose it for an instant. Mr. Rochester looks as young and is as young as some men at 25.
Is it really for love he is going to marry you?
I was so hurt by her coldness and skepticism that the tears rose to my eyes.
Oh, I am sorry to grieve you, but you are so young and so little acquainted with men. I wished to put you on your guard. It is an old saying that all is not gold that glitters. And in this case, I do fear there will be something found to be different to what either you or I expect.
Why? Am I a monster? Is it impossible that Mr. Rochester should have a sincere affection for me?
No, you are very well and much improved of late. Mr. Rochester, I dare say, is fond of you. I have always noticed that you are a sort of pet of his. There are times when, for your sake, I have been a little uneasy at his marked preference and have wished to put you on your guard. But I did not like to suggest even the possibility of wrong. I knew such an idea would shock, perhaps offend you. And you were so discreet and so thoroughly modest and sensible. I hoped you might be trusted to protect yourself. Last night, I cannot tell you what I suffered when I sought all over the house and couldn't find you nowhere, nor the master either, and then at 12 o'clock saw you come in with him.
Well, never mind that now. It is enough that all was right.
We may have a technical difficulty, so I will take over. I hope all will be right in the end, but believe me, you cannot be too careful. Try and keep Mr. Rochester at a distance. Distrust yourself as well as him. Gentlemen in his station are not accustomed to marry their governesses.
I was growing truly irritated. Happily, Adele ran in.
Let me go to Millcote too. Mr. Rochester won't, though there is so much room in the new carriage. Beg him to let me go, mademoiselle.
That I will, Adele.
And I hastened away with her, glad to quit my gloomy monitress. The carriage was ready. They were bringing it round to the front, and my master was pacing the pavement, Pilot following him backwards and forwards.
Adele may accompany us, may she not, sir?
I told her no, I'll have no brats. I'll have only you.
Do let her go, Mr. Rochester, if you please. It would be better.
Not it. She will be a restraint.
He was quite peremptory, both in look and voice. The chill of Mrs. Fairfax's warnings and the damp of her doubts were upon me. Something of unsubstantiality and uncertainty had beset my hopes. I had lost half the sense of power over him. I was about mechanically to obey him without further remonstrance. But as he helped me into the carriage, he looked into my face.
What is the matter? All the sunshine is gone. Do you really wish the bairn to go? Will it annoy you if she is left behind?
I would far rather she went.
Then off for your bonnet and back like a flash of lightning.
She obeyed in with what speed she might.
After all, a single morning's interruption will not matter much when I mean shortly to claim you, your thoughts, conversation, and company for life.
Adele, when lifted in, commenced kissing me by way of expressing her gratitude for my intercession. She was instantly stowed away into a corner on the other side of him. She then peeped round to where I sat. So stern a neighbor was too restrictive. To him in his present fractious mood, she dared whisper no observations, nor ask of him any information.
Let her come to me. She will perhaps trouble you, sir. There is plenty of room on this side.
He handed her over as if she had been a lapdog.
I'll send her to school yet.
But now he was smiling. Adele heard him and asked if she was to go to school.
So, mademoiselle?
Yes, absolutely, sans mademoiselle. For I am to take mademoiselle to the moon, and there I shall seek a cave in one of the white valleys among the volcano tops, and mademoiselle shall live with me there, and only me.
She will have nothing to eat. You will starve her.
I shall gather manna for her morning and night. The plains and hillsides in the moon are bleached with manna, Adele.
She will want to warm herself. What will she do for a fire?
Fire rises out of the lunar mountains. When she is cold, I'll carry her up to a peak and lay her down the edge of a crater.
Oh, qu'elle sera mal, peu confortable. And her clothes, they will wear out. How can she get new ones?
Mr. Rochester professed to be puzzled.
What would you do, Adele? Cudgel your brains for an expedient? How would a white or a pink cloud answer for a gown, do you think? And one could cut a pretty enough scarf out of a rainbow.
Oh, she is far better as she is. Besides, she would get tired of living with only you in the moon. If I were mademoiselle, I would never consent to go with you.
She has consented. She has pledged her word.
But you can't get her there. There is no road to the moon. It is all air, and neither you nor she can fly.
Adele, look at that field.
We were now outside Thornfield gates, and bowling lightly among the small road to Millcott, where the dust was laid by the thunderstorm, and where the low hedges and lofty timber trees on either side glistened green and rain refreshed.
In that field, Adele, I was walking late one evening about a fortnight since, the evening of the day you helped me make hay in the orchard meadows. And as I was tired with raking swaths, I sat down to rest me on a stile, and there I took out a little book and pencil and began to write about a misfortune that befell me long ago, and a wish I had for happy days to come. I was writing away very fast, though daylight was fading from the leaf, when something came up the path and stopped 2 yards off me. I looked at it. It was a little thing with a veil of gossamer on its head. I beckoned it to come near me. It stood soon at my knee. I never spoke to it, and it never spoke to me in words. But I read its eyes, and it read mine, and our speechless colloquy was to this effect. It was a fairy, and come from Elfland, it said, and its errand was to make me happy. I must go with it out of the common world to a lonely place, such as the moon, for instance, and it nodded its head towards her horn, rising over Hay Hill. It told me of the alabaster cave and silver vale where we might live. I said I should like to go, but reminded it, as you did me, that I had no wings to fly. Oh, returned the fairy, that does not signify. Here is a talisman will remove all difficulties. And she held out a pretty gold ring. Put it, she said, on the fourth finger of my left hand, and I am yours and you are mine, and we shall leave earth and make our own heaven yonder. She nodded again at the moon. The ring, Adele, was in my breeches pocket under the disguise of a sovereign, but I mean soon to change it to a ring again.
But what has mademoiselle to do with it? I don't care for the fairy. You said it was mademoiselle you would take to the moon.
Mademoiselle is a fairy,
he said, whispering mysteriously, whereupon I told her not to mind his badinage, and she on her part evinced a fund of genuine fresh skepticism, denominating Mr. Rochester
un vrai menteur,
and assuring him that she made no account whatsoever of his
conte de fées.
And that,
du reste, il n'y avait pas de fées, et quand même, il y en avait.
She was sure they would never appear to him, nor ever give him rings or offer to live with him in the moon. The hour spent at Millcott was a somewhat harassing one to me. Mr. Rochester obliged me to go to a certain silk warehouse. There I was ordered to choose half a dozen dresses. I hated the business. I begged leave to defer it. No, it should be gone through with now. By dint of entreaties expressed with energetic whispers, I reduced the half dozen to 2. Those, however, he vowed he would select himself. With anxiety, I watched his eye rove over the gay stores. He fixed on a rich silk of the most brilliant amethyst dye and a superb pink satin. Told him in a new series of whispers that he might as well buy me a gold gown and a silver bonnet at once. I should certainly never venture to wear his choice. With infinite difficulty, for he was stubborn as a stone, I persuaded him to make an exchange in favor of a sober black satin and pearl gray silk.
It might pass for the present, but he would yet see me glittering like a parterre.
Glad was I to get out of the silk warehouse and then out of a jeweler's shop. The more he bought me, the more my cheek burned with a sense of annoyance and degradation. As we re-entered the carriage, I sat back, feverish and fagged. I remembered what, in the hurry of events dark and bright, I had wholly forgotten. The letter of my Uncle John Eyre to Mrs. Reed, his intention to adopt me and make me his legatee.
It would indeed be a relief.
I thought,
if I had ever so small an independency, I never can bear being dressed like a doll by Mr. Rochester or sitting like a second Danae with the golden shower falling daily round me. I will write to Madeira the moment I get home and tell my Uncle John I am going to be married and to whom. If I had but a prospect of one day bringing Mr. Rochester an accession of fortune, I could better endure to be kept by him now.
And somewhat relieved by this idea, which I failed not to execute that day, I ventured once more to meet my master's and lover's eye, which most tenaciously sought mine, though I averted both face and gaze. He smiled, and I thought his smile was such as a sultan might, in a blissful and fond moment, bestow on a slave his golden gems had enriched. I crushed his hand, which was ever hunting mine vigorously, and thrust it back to him, red with the passionate pressure.
You need not look in that way. If you do, I'll wear nothing but my old Lowood frocks to the end of the chapter. I'll be married in this lilac gingham. You may make a dressing gown for yourself out of the pearl gray silk and an infinite series of waistcoats out of the black satin.
He chuckled. He rubbed his hands.
Oh, is it rich to see and hear her? Is she original? Is she piquant? I would not exchange this one little English girl for all the Grand Turk's whole seraglio, gazelle eyes, hoary forms, and all.
The Eastern illusion bit me again.
I'll not stand you an inch in the stead of a seraglio, so don't consider me an equivalent for one. If you have a fancy for anything in that line, away with you, sir, to the bazaars of Stamboul without delay, and lay out in extensive slave purchases some of that spare cash you seem at a loss to spend satisfactorily here.
And what will you do, Janet, while I am bargaining for so many tons of flesh and such an assortment of black eyes?
I'll be preparing myself to go out as a missionary to preach liberty to them that are enslaved, your harem inmates amongst the rest. I'll get admitted there and I'll stir up mutiny. And you, three-tailed bashaw as you are, sir, shall in trice find yourself fettered amongst our hands. Nor will I, for one, consent to cut your bonds till you have signed a charter, the most liberal that despot ever yet conferred.
I would consent to be at your mercy, Jane.
I would have no mercy, Mr. Rochester, if you implicated for it with an eye like that. While you looked so, I should be certain that whatever charter you might grant under coercion, your first act, when released, would be to violate its conditions.
Why, Jane, what would you have? I fear you will compel me to go through a private marriage ceremony, besides that performed at the altar. You will stipulate, I see, for particular terms. What will they be?
I only want an easy mind, sir, not crushed by crowded obligations. Do you remember what you said of Celine Varennes, of the diamonds, the cashmeres you gave her? I will not be your English Celine Varennes. I will continue to act as Adele's governess. I shall earn my board and lodging and £30 a year besides. I'll furnish my own wardrobe out of that money, and you shall give me nothing but...
Well, but what?
Your regard. And if I give you mine in return, that debt will be quit.
Well, for cool native impudence and pure innate pride, you haven't your equal.
We were
We
now
were now-
approaching Thornfield.
Will it please you dine with me today?
Yes, as we re-entered the gates.
No, thank you, sir.
And what for? No thank you, if one may inquire.
I never have dined with you, sir, and I see no reason why I should now, till
Till what? You delight in half phrases.
I can't help it.
Do you suppose I eat like an ogre or a ghoul that you dread being the companion of my repast?
I have formed no supposition on the subject, sir, but I want to go on as usual for another month.
You will give up your governessing slavery at once.
Indeed, begging your pardon, sir, I shall not. I shall just go on with it as usual. I shall keep out of your way all day, as I have been accustomed to do. You may send for me in the evening when you feel disposed to see me, and I'll come then, but at no other time.
I want a smoke, Jane, or a pinch of snuff to comfort me under all this poor middle wah 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 wah, as Adele would say. And unfortunately, I have neither my cigar case nor my snuff box. But listen, whisper. It is your time now, little tyrant, but it will be mine presently. And when once I have fairly seized you to have and to hold, I'll just, figuratively speaking, attach you like a chain, like this. Yes, bonny wee thing, I'll wear you in my bosom, lest my jewel I should tine.
He said this as he helped me to alight from the carriage, and while he afterwards lifted out Adele, I entered the house and made good my retreat upstairs. He duly summoned me to his presence in the evening. I had prepared an occupation for him, for I was determined not to spend the whole time in a tete-a-tete conversation. I remembered his fine voice. I knew he liked to sing. Good singers generally do. I was no vocalist myself, and in his fastidious judgment, no musician either. But I delighted in listening when the performance was good. No sooner had twilight, that hour of romance, began to lower her blue and starry banner over the lattice. Then I rose, opened the piano, entreated him for the love of heaven to give me a song. He said I was a capricious witch, and that he would rather sing another time, but I averted that no time is like the present.
Did I like his voice?
Very much.
I was not fond of pampering that susceptible vanity of his, but for once, and from motives of expediency, I soothed and stimulated.
Then, Jane, you must play the accompaniment.
Very well, sir, I will try.
I did try, but was presently swept off the stool and denominated
A little bungler.
being pushed unceremoniously to the side, which was precisely what I wished. He usurped my place and proceeded to accompany himself, for he could play as well as sing. I hurried to the window recess, and while I sat there and looked out on the still trees and dim lawn, to a sweet air was sung in mellow tones the following strain.
The truest love that ever heart felt at its kindled core did through each vein and quicken start the tide of being pour. Her coming was my hope each day, her parting was my pain. The chance that did her steps delay was ice and very vain. I dreamed it would be nameless bliss, as I loved love to be, and to this object did I press, as blind as eagerly. But wide as pathless was the space that lay our lives between, and dangerous the foamy race of ocean surges green, and haunted as a robber path through wilderness or wood, for might and right and woe and wrath between our spirits stood. I dangers dared, I hindrance scorned, I omens did defy. Whatever menaced, harassed, warned, I passed impetuous by. On sped my rainbow fast as light, I flew as in a dream, for glorious rose upon my sight that child of shower and gleam. Still bright upon the clouds of suffering dim shines that soft solemn joy, nor care I now how dense and grim disasters gather nigh. I care not in this moment sweet, though all I have rushed o'er should come on pinion strong and fleet, proclaiming vengeance sore. Though haughty hail should strike me down, right bar approach to me, and grinding might with furious frowns swear endless enmity. My love has placed her little hand with noble faith in mine, and vowed that wedlock's sacred band our nature shall entwine. My love has sworn with sealing kiss with me to live, to die, I have at last my nameless bliss, as I loved am I.
He rose and came towards me, and I saw his face all kindled, and his full falcon eye flashing, and tenderness and passion in every lineament. I quailed momentarily, and then I rallied. The oft-seen darling demonstration I would not have, and I stood in peril of both. A weapon of defense must be prepared. I wetted my tongue as he reached me. I asked with asperity
whom he was going to marry now.
That was a strange question to be put by his darling Jane.
Indeed, I considered it a very natural and necessary one. He had talked of his future wife dying with him. What did he mean by such a pagan idea? I had no intention of dying with him. He might depend on that.
Oh, all he longed, all he prayed for was that I might live with him. Death was not for such as I.
Indeed it was. I had as good a right to die when my time came as he had, but I should bide that time and not be hurried away in a suttee.
Would I forgive him for the selfish idea and prove my pardon by a reconciling kiss?
No, I would rather be excused.
Here I heard myself apostrophized as a
Hard little thing.
and it was added,
Any other woman would have been melted to marrow at hearing such stanzas crooned in her praise.
I assured him I was naturally hard, very flinty, and that he would often find me, and that, moreover, I was determined to show him divers rugged points in my character before the ensuing 4 weeks elapsed. He should know fully what sort of a bargain he had made, while there was yet time to rescind it.
Would I be quiet and talk rationally?
I would be quiet if he liked, and as to talking rationally, I flattered myself I was doing that now.
He fretted, pished, and scoffed.
Very good.
I thought.
You may fume and fidget as you please, but this is the best plan to pursue with you, I am certain. I like you more than I can say, but I'll not sink into a bathos of sentiment. And with this needle of repartee, I'll keep you from the edge of the gulf, too, and moreover maintain by its pungent aid that distance between you and myself most conducive to our real mutual advantage.
From less to more, I worked him up to considerable irritation. Then after he had retired in dungeon, quite to the other end of the room, I got up and saying, I wish you good night, sir, in my natural and wonted respectful manner, I slipped up at the side door and got away. The system thus entered on, I pursued during the whole season of probation, and with the best success. He was kept, to be sure, rather cross and crusty, but on the whole I could see he was excellently entertained, and that a lamb-like submission and turtle-dove sensibility, while fostering his despotism, once more would have pleased his judgment, satisfied his common sense, and even suited his taste less. In other people's presence, I was as formerly deferential and quiet, any other line of conduct being uncalled for, for it was only in the evening conferences I thus thwarted and afflicted him. He continued to send for me punctually the moment the clock struck 7, though when I appeared before him, he had no such honeyed returns as love and darling.
Love and darling.
Yes. The best words at my service were provoking
puppet, malicious elf, sprite, changeling,
and etc. For caresses too, I now got grimaces. For a pressure of the hand, a pinch on the arm. For a kiss on the cheek, a severe tweak of the ear. It was all right. At present, I decidedly preferred these fierce favors to anything more tender. Mrs. Fairfax, I saw, approved me. Her anxiety on my account vanished. Therefore, I was certain I did well. Meanwhile, Mr. Rochester affirmed I was wearing him to skin and bone, and threatened awful vengeance for my present conduct at some period past coming. I laughed in my sleeve at his menaces.
I can keep you in reasonable check now,
I reflected.
And I don't doubt to be able to do it hereafter. If one expedient loses its virtue, another must be devised.
Yet after all, my task was not an easy one. I would rather have pleased than teased him. My future husband was becoming to me my whole world, and more than the world, almost my hope of heaven. He stood between me and every thought of religion, as an eclipse intervenes between man and the broad sun. I could not in those days see God for his creature, of whom I had made an idol. Chapter 25. The month of courtship had wasted. Its very last hours were being numbered. There was no putting off the day that advanced, the bridal day, and all preparations for its arrival were complete. I, at least, had nothing more to do. There were my trunks, packed, locked, corded, ranged in a row along the wall of my little chamber. Tomorrow at this time, they would be far on their road to London, and so should I. Or rather, not I, but one Jane Rochester, a person whom as yet I knew not. The cards of address alone remained to nail on. They lay 4 little squares in the drawer. Mr. Rochester had himself written the directions.
Mrs. Rochester, Hotel, London.
On each. I could not persuade myself to affix them, or to have them affixed. Mrs. Rochester? She did not exist. She would not be born till tomorrow, sometime after 8:00 a.m., and I would wait to be assured she had come into the world alive before I assigned her to all that property. It was enough that in yonder closet opposite my dressing table, garments said to be hers had already displaced my blacks, stuff, lowered frock, and straw bonnet, for not to me appertained that suit of wedding raiment, the pearl-colored robe, the vapory veil pendant from the usurped portmanteau. I shut the closet to conceal the strange, wraith-like apparel it contained, which at this evening hour, 9:00, gave out certainly a most ghostly shimmer through the shadow of my apartment.
I will leave you by yourself, White Dream. I am feverish. I hear the wind blowing. I will go out of doors and feel it.
It was not only the hurry of preparation that made me feverish, nor only the anticipation of the great change, the new life, which was to commence tomorrow. Both these circumstances had their share, doubtless, in producing that restless, excited mood which hurried me forth at this late hour into the darkening grounds, but a third cause influenced my mind more than they. I had at my heart a strange and anxious thought. Something had happened which I could not comprehend. No one knew of or had seen the event but myself. It had taken place the preceding night. Mr. Rochester that night was absent from home, nor was he yet returned. Business had called him to a small estate of 2 or 3 farms he possessed 30 miles off. Business, it was requisite, he should settle in person, previous to his meditated departure from England. I waited on his return, eager to disburthen my mind and to seek of him the solution of the enigma that perplexed me. Stay he comes, reader, and when I disclose my secret to him, you shall share the confidence. I sought the orchard, driven to its shelter by the wind, which all day had blown strong and full from the south, without, however, bringing a speck of rain. Instead of subsiding as night drew on, it seemed to augment its rush and deepen its roar. The trees blew steadfastly one way, never writhing round and scarcely tossing back their boughs once in an hour. So continuous was the strain, bending their branchy heads northward. The clouds drifted from pole to pole, fast following mass on mass. No glimpse of blue sky had been visible that July day. It was not without a certain wild pleasure I ran before the wind, delivering my trouble of mind to the measureless air torrent, thundering through space. Descending the Laurel Walk, I faced the wreck of the chestnut tree. It stood up black and riven, the trunk split down the center, ghastly. The closen halves were not broken from each other, but the firm base and the strong roots kept them unsundered below. The community of vitality was destroyed. The sap could flow no more. Their great boughs on each side were dead. The next winter's tempest would be sure to fell one or both to earth, and yet, however, they might be said to form one tree, a ruin, but an entire ruin.
You did right to hold fast to each other.
I said, as if the monstrous splinters were living things that could hear me.
I think, scathed as you look and charred and scorched, there must be little sense of life in you yet, rising out of that adhesion at the faithful, honest roots. You will never have green leaves more, never more see birds making nests and singing edels in your boughs. The time of pleasure and love is over with you, but you are not desolate. Each of you has a comrade to sympathize with him in his decay.
As I looked up at them, the moon appeared momentarily in that part of the sky which filled their fissure. Her disk was blood red and half overcast. She seemed to throw on me one bewildered, dreary glance and buried herself instantly in the deep drift of cloud. The wind fell for a second round Thornfield, but far away over wood and water poured a wild, melancholy wail. It was sad to listen to, and I ran off again. Here and there I strayed through the orchard, gathered up the apples with which the grass round the tree roots were thickly strewn. Then I employed myself in dividing the ripe from the unripe. I carried them into the house and put them away in the storeroom. Then I approached the library to ascertain whether the fire was lit. For the summer, I knew on such a gloomy evening Mr. Rochester would like to see a cheerful hearth when he came in. Yes, the fire had been kindled some time ago and burnt well. I placed his armchair by the chimney corner. I wheeled the table near it. I lit the curtain and had the candles brought in for lighting. More restless than ever, when I completed these arrangements, I could not sit still, not even remain in the house. A little timepiece in the room and the old clock in the hall simultaneously struck 10.
How late it grows. I will run down to the gates. It is moonlight at intervals. I can see a good way down the road. He may be coming now, and to meet him will save some minutes of suspense.
The wind roared high in the great trees which embowered the gates, but the road, as far as I could see, to the right hand and the left, was all still and solitary, save for the shadows of clouds crossing it at intervals as the moon looked out. But it was a long, pale line, unvaried by one moving speck. A puerile tear dimmed my eye while I looked, a tear of disappointment and impatience. Ashamed of it, I wiped it away. I lingered. The moon shut herself wholly within her chamber and drew close her curtain of dense cloud. The night grew dark. Rain came driving fast on the gale.
I wish he would come. I wish he would come.
I exclaimed, seized with hypochondriac foreboding. I had expected his arrival before tea, and now it was dark. What could keep him? Had an accident happened? The event of last night again recurred to me. I interpreted it as a warning of disaster. I feared my hopes were too bright to be realized, and I enjoyed so much bliss lately that I imagined my fortune had been past its meridian and must now decline.
Well, I cannot return to the house. I cannot sit by the fireside while he is abroad in inclement weather. Better tire my limbs than strain my heart. I will go forward and meet him.
I set out. I walked fast, but not far. Ere I had measured a quarter of a mile, I heard the tramp of hoofs. A horseman came on full gallop, a dog by his side. Away with evil presentiment. It was he. Here he was, mounted on Mesor, followed Pilot. He saw me, for the moon had opened a blue field in the sky and rode in it watery bright. He took his hat off and waved around his head. I now ran to meet him.
There.
He exclaimed as he stretched out his hand and bent from the saddle.
You can't do without me, that is evident. Step on my boot toe. Give me both hands. Mount.
I obeyed. Joy made me agile. I sprang up before him. A hearty kissing I got for my welcome and some boastful triumph, which I swallowed as well as I could. He checked himself in his exultation to demand.
But is there anything the matter, Janet, that you come to meet me at such an hour? Is there anything wrong?
No, but I thought you would never come. I could not bear to wait in the house for you, especially with this rain and wind.
Rain and wind indeed. Yes, you are dripping like a mermaid. Pull my cloak round you. I think you are feverish, Jane. Both your cheek and hand are burning hot. I ask you again, is there anything the matter?
Nothing now. I am neither afraid nor unhappy.
Then you have been both.
Rather. But I'll tell you all about it by and by, sir, and I dare say you will only laugh at me for my pains.
I'll laugh at you heartily when tomorrow is past. Till then I dare not. My prize is not certain. This is you who have been as slippery as an eel this last month and as thorny as a briar rose. I could not lay a finger anywhere but I was pricked, and now I seem to have gathered up a stray lamb in my arms. You wandered out of the fold to seek your shepherd, did you, Jane?
I wanted you, but don't boast. Here we are at Thornfield. Now let me get down.
He landed me on the pavement. As John took his horse and he followed me into the hall, he told me to make haste and put something dry on, and then return to him in the library. And he stopped me as I made for the staircase to extort a promise that I would not be long, nor was I. In 5 minutes I rejoined him. I found him at supper.
Take a seat and bear me company, Jane. Please God, as the last meal but one you will eat at Thornfield for a long time.
I sat down near him, but told him I could not eat.
Is it because you have the prospect of a journey before you, Jane? Is it the thoughts of going to London that takes away your appetite?
I cannot see my prospects clearly tonight, sir, and I hardly know what thoughts I have in my head. Everything in life seems unreal.
Except me, I am substantial enough. Touch me.
You, sir, are the most phantom-like of all. You are a mere dream.
He held out his hand, laughing.
Is that a dream?
Said he, placing it close to my eyes. He had a rounded, muscular, and vigorous hand, as well as a long, strong arm.
Yes, though I touch it, it is a dream.
Said I, as I put it down from before my face.
Sir, have you finished supper?
Yes, Jane.
I rang the bell and ordered away the tray. When we were again alone, I stirred the fire and then took a low seat at my master's knee.
It is near midnight.
Yes, but remember, Jane, you promised to wake me the night before my wedding.
I did, and I will keep my promise for an hour or two at least. I have no wish to go to bed.
Are all your arrangements complete?
All, sir.
And on my part, likewise. I have settled everything, and we shall leave Thornfield tomorrow within half an hour after our return from church.
Very well, sir.
With what an extraordinary smile you uttered that word. Very well, Jane. What a bright spot of color you have on each cheek, and how strangely your eyes glitter. Are you well?
I believe I am.
Believe? What is the matter? Tell me what you feel.
I could not, sir. No words could tell you what I feel. I wish this present hour would never end. Who knows with what fate the next may come charged.
This is hypochondria, Jane. You have been overexcited or overfatigued.
Do you, sir, feel calm and happy?
Calm, no, but happy to the heart's core.
I looked at him, up to him to read the signs of bliss in his face. It was ardent and flushed.
Give me your confidence, Jane. Relieve your mind of any weight that oppresses it by imparting it to me. What do you fear, that I shall not prove a good husband?
It is the idea farthest from my thoughts.
Are you apprehensive of the new sphere you are about to enter, of the new life into which you are passing?
No.
You puzzle me, Jane. Your look and tone of sorrowful audacity perplex and pain me. I want an explanation.
Then, sir, listen. You were from home last night.
I was. I know that, and you hinted a while ago at something which happened in my absence. Nothing probably of consequence, but in short, it has disturbed you. Let me hear it. Mrs. Fairfax said something, perhaps, or you have overheard the servants talk. Your sensitive self-respect has been wounded?
No, sir.
It struck 12. I waited till the timepiece had concluded its silver chime, and the clock its hoarse, vibrating stroke. And then I proceeded.
All day yesterday I was very busy and very happy in my ceaseless bustle, for I am not, as you seem to think, troubled by any haunting fears about the new sphere, etc. I think it a glorious thing to have the hope of living with you because I love you. No, sir, don't caress me now. Let me talk undisturbed. Yesterday, I trusted well in Providence and believed that events were working together for your good and mine. It was a fine day, if you recollect. The calmness of the air and sky forbade apprehensions respecting your safety or comfort on your journey. I walked a little while on the pavement after tea, thinking of you, and I beheld you in imagination so near me, I scarcely missed your actual presence. I thought of the life that lay before me, your life, sir, an existence more expansive and stirring than my own, as much more so as the depths of the sea to which the brook runs are than the shallows of its own straight channel. I wondered why moralists call this world a dreary wilderness. For me, it blossomed like a rose. Just at sunset, the air turned cold and the sky cloudy. I went in. Sophie called me upstairs to look at my wedding dress, which they had just brought. and under it in the box I found your present, the veil which in your princely extravagance you sent for from London, resolved, I suppose, since I would not have jewels, to cheat me into accepting something as costly. I smiled as I unfolded it and devised how I would tease you about your aristocratic tastes and your efforts to mask your plebeian bride in the attributes of a peeress. I thought how I would carry down to you the square of unembroidered blonde I had myself prepared as a covering for my low-born head, and ask if that was not good enough for a woman who could bring her husband neither fortune, beauty, nor connections. I saw plainly how you would look, and heard your impetuous Republican answers and your haughty disavowal of any necessity on your part to augment your wealth or elevate your standing by marrying either a purse or a coronet.
How well you read me, you witch. But what did you find in the veil besides its embroidery? Did you find poison or a dagger that you look so mournful now?
No, no, sir. Besides the delicacy and richness of the fabric, I found nothing save Fairfax Rochester's pride, and that did not scare me because I am used to the sight of the demon. But, sir, as it grew dark, the wind rose, the evening, not as it blows now, wild and high, but with a sullen, moaning sound, far more eerie. I wished you were at home. I came into this room, and the sight of the empty chair and fireless hearth chilled me. For some time after I went to bed, I could not sleep. A sense of anxious excitement distressed me. The gale still rising seemed to my ear to muffle a mournful undersound. Whether in the house or abroad, I could not at first tell, but it recurred, doubtful yet doleful at every lull. At last I made out it must be some dog howling at a distance. I was glad when it ceased. On sleeping, I continued in dreams the idea of a dark and gusty night. I continued also the wish to be with you, and experienced a strange, regretful consciousness of some barrier dividing us. During all my first sleep, I was following the windings of an unknown road. Total obscurity environed me. Rain pelted me. I was burdened with the charge of a little child, a very small creature, too young and feeble to walk, and which shivered in my cold arms and wailed piteously in my ear. I thought, sir, that you were on the road a long way before me, and I strained every nerve to overtake you and made effort on effort to utter your name and entreat you to stop, but my movements were fettered and my voice still died away inarticulate, while you, I felt, withdrew farther and farther every moment.
And these dreams weigh on your spirits now, Jane, when I am close to you. Little nervous subject. Forget visionary woe and think only of real happiness. You say you love me, Janet. Yes, I will not forget that, and you cannot deny it. Those words did not die inarticulate on your lips. I heard them clear and soft, a thought too solemn perhaps, but sweet as music. I think it is a glorious thing to have the hope of living with you, Edward, because I love you. Do you love me, Jane? Repeat it.
I do, sir, I do with my whole heart.
Well,
he said after some minutes' silence.
It is strange, but that sentence has penetrated my breast painfully. Why? I think because you said it with such an earnest religious energy, and because your upward gaze at me now is the very sublime of faith, truth, and devotion. It is too much as if some spirit were near me. Look, wicked Jane, as you know well how to look. Coin one of your wild, shy, provoking smiles. Tell me you hate me, tease me, vex me. Do anything but move me. I would rather be incensed than saddened.
I will tease you and vex you to your heart's content when I have finished my tale, but hear me to the end.
I thought, Jane, you had told me all. I thought I had found the source of your melancholy in a dream.
I shook my head.
What? Is there more? But I will not believe it to be anything important. I warn you of incredulity beforehand. Go on.
The disquietude of his air, the somewhat apprehensive impatience of his manner surprised me, but I proceeded.
I dreamt another dream, sir, that Thornfield Hall was a dreary ruin, the retreat of bats and owls. I thought that of all the stately front, nothing remained but a shell-like wall, very high and very fragile looking. I wandered on a moonlight night through the grass-grown enclosure within. Here I stumbled over a marble hearth, and there over a fallen fragment of cornice. Wrapped up in a shawl, I still carried the unknown little child. I might not lay it down anywhere, however tired were my arms. However much its weight impeded my progress, I must retain it. I heard the gallop of a horse at a distance on the road. I was sure it was you, and you were departing for many years and for a distant country. I climbed the thin wall with frantic, perilous haste, eager to catch one glimpse of you from the top. The stones rolled from under my feet. The ivy branches I grasped gave way. The child clung around my neck in terror and almost strangled me. At last, I gained the summit. I saw you like a speck on a white trap, lessening every moment. The blast grew so strong I could not stand. I sat down on the narrow ledge. I hushed the scared infant in my lap. You turned an angle of the road. I bent forward to take a last look. The wall crumbled. I was shaken. The child rolled from my knee. I lost my balance, fell, and woke.
Now, Jane, that is all.
All the preface, sir. The tale is yet to come. On waking, a gleam dazzled my eyes. I thought, oh, it is daylight. But I was mistaken. It was only candlelight. Sophie, I supposed, had come in. There was a light in the dressing table, and the door of the closet where, before going to bed, I had hung my wedding dress and veil stood open. I heard a rustling there. I asked, Sophie, what are you doing? No one answered, but a form emerged from the closet. It took the light, held it aloft, and surveyed the garments pendant from the portmanteau. Sophie, Sophie, I again cried, and still it was silent. I had risen up in bed. I bent forward. First surprise, then bewilderment came over me, and then my blood crept cold through my veins. Mr. Rochester, this was not Sophie. It was not Leah. It was not Mrs. Fairfax. It was not, no, I was sure of it, and am still. It was not even that strange woman, Grace Poole.
It must have been one of them.
No, sir, I solemnly assure you to the contrary. The shape standing before me had never crossed my eyes within the precincts of Thornfield Hall before. The height, the contour were new to me.
Describe it, Jane.
It seemed, sir, a woman, tall and large, with thick and dark hair hanging long down her back. I know not what dress she had on. It was white and straight, but whether gown, sheet, or shroud, I cannot tell.
Did you see her face?
Not at first, but presently she took my veil from its place. She held it up, gazed at it long, and then she threw it over her own head and turned to the mirror. At that moment, I saw the reflection of the visage and features quite distinctly in the dark oblong glass.
And how were they?
Fearful and ghastly to me. Oh, sir, I never saw a face like it. It was a discolored face. It was a savage face. I wish I could forget the roll of the red eyes and the fearful blackened inflation of the lineaments.
Ghosts are usually pale, Jane.
This, sir, was purple. The lips were swelled and dark, the brow furrowed, the black eyebrows widely raised over the bloodshot eyes. Shall I tell you of what it reminded me?
You may.
Of the foul German specter, the vampire.
Ah, what did it do?
Sir, it removed my veil from its gaunt head, rent it in two parts, and flinging both on the floor, trampled on them.
Afterwards?
It drew aside the window curtain and looked out. Perhaps it saw dawn approaching, for taking the candle, it retreated to the door. Just at my bedside, the figure stopped. The fiery eyes glared upon me. She thrust up her candle close to my face and extinguished it under my eyes. I was aware of her lurid visage flamed over mine, and I lost consciousness. For the second time in my life, only the second time, I became insensible from terror.
Who was with you when you revived?
No one, sir, but the broad day. I rose, bathed my head and face in water, drank a long draught, felt that though enfeebled, I was not ill, and determined that to none but you would I impart this vision. Now, sir, tell me who and what that woman was.
The creature of an overstimulated brain, that is certain. I must be careful of you, my treasure. Nerves like yours were not made for rough handling.
Sir, depend on it, my nerves were not in fault. The thing was real. The transaction actually took place.
And your previous dreams, were they real too? Is Thornfield Hall a ruin? Am I, sir, severed from you by insuperable obstacles? Am I leaving you without a tear, without a kiss, without a word?
Not yet.
Am I about to do it? Why, the day has already commenced, which is to bind us indissolubly. And when we are once united, there shall be no recurrence of these mental terrors. I guarantee that.
Mental terrors, sir. I wish I could believe them to be only such. I wish it more now than ever, since even you cannot explain to me the mystery of that awful visitant.
And since I cannot do it, Jane, it must have been unreal.
But, sir, when I said so to myself on rising this morning, and when I looked round the room to gather courage and comfort from the cheerful aspect of each familiar object in full daylight, there, on the carpet, I saw what gave the distinct lie to my hypothesis, the veil torn from top to bottom in two halves.
I felt Mr. Rochester start and shudder. He hastily flung his arms around me.
Thank God that if anything malignant did come near you last night, it was only the veil that was harmed. Oh, to think what might have happened.
He drew his breath short and strained me so close to him I could scarcely pant. After some minutes' silence, he continued cheerfully.
Now, Janet, I'll explain to you all about it. It was a half dream, half reality. A woman did, I doubt not, enter your room, and that woman must have been Grace Poole. You call her a strange being yourself. From all you know, you have reason to call her. What did she do to me? What to Mason? In a state between sleeping and waking, you noticed her entrance and her actions, but feverish, almost delirious as you were, you ascribed to her a goblin appearance different from her own. The long disheveled hair, the swelled black face, the exaggerated stature were figments of imagination, results of nightmare. The spiteful tearing of the veil was real, and it is like her. I see you would ask why I keep such a woman in my house. When we have been married a year and a day, I will tell you, but not now. Are you satisfied, Jane? Do you accept my solution of the mystery?
I reflected, and in truth it appeared to me the only possible one. Satisfied I was not, but to please him I endeavored to appear so. Relieved I certainly did feel, so I answered him with a contented smile, and now, as it was long past 1, I prepared to leave him.
Does not Sophie sleep with Adele in the nursery?
He asked, as I lit my candle.
Yes, sir.
And is there room enough in Adele's little bed for you? You must share it with her tonight, Jane. It is no wonder that the incident you have related should make you nervous, and I would rather you did not sleep alone. Promise me to go to the nursery.
I shall be very glad to do so, sir.
And fasten the door securely on the inside. Wake Sophie when you go upstairs under pretense of requesting her to rouse you in a good time tomorrow, for you must be dressed and have finished breakfast before 8. And now no more somber thoughts. Chase dull care away, Janet. Don't you hear to what soft whispers the wind has fallen? And there is no more beating of rain against the window panes. Look here. It is a lovely night. It is a lovely night.
It was. Half heaven was pure and stainless. The clouds now trooping before the wind, which had shifted to the west, were filing off eastward in long silvered columns. The moon shone peacefully.
Well,
said Mr. Rochester, gazing inquiringly into my eye.
How is my Janet now?
The night is serene, sir, and so am I.
And you will not dream of separation and sorrow tonight, but of happy love and blissful union?
The prediction was but half fulfilled. I did not dream of sorrow, but as little did I dream of joy, for I never slept at all. With little Adele in my arms, I watched the slumber of childhood, so tranquil, so passionate, so innocent, and waited for the coming day. All my life was awake and astir in my frame, and as soon as the sun rose, I rose too. I remember Adele clung to me as I left her. I remember I kissed her as I loosened her little hands from my neck, and I cried over her, a strange emotion, and quitted her because I feared my sobs would break her still sound repose. She seemed the emblem of my past life, and he I was now to array myself to meet, the dread but adored type of my unknown future day. Chapter 26. Sophie came at 7 to dress me. She was very long indeed in accomplishing her task, so long that Mr. Rochester groaned, I suppose impatient of my delay, sent up to ask why I did not come. She was just fastening my veil, the plain square of blonde, after all, to my hair with a brooch. I hurried from under her hands as soon as I could.
Stop!
He cried in French.
Look at yourself in the mirror. You have not taken one peep.
So I turned at the door. I saw a robed and veiled figure so unlike my usual self that it seemed almost the image of a stranger. Jane, called a voice, and I hastened down. I was received at the foot of the stairs by Mr. Rochester.
Lingerer, my brain is on fire with impatience, and you tarry so long.
He took me into the dining room, surveyed me keenly all over, pronounced me.
Is John getting the carriage ready?
He pronounced me fair. Oh, all right. Yes.
Oh, sorry. The fair is a lily, and not only the pride of his life, but the desire of his eyes.
And then telling me he would give me but 10 minutes to eat some breakfast, he rang the bell. One of his lately hired servants, a footman, came in.
Is John getting the carriage ready?
Yes, sir.
Is the carriage brought down?
They are bringing it down, sir.
Go you to the church, see if Mr. Wood, the clergyman, and the clerk are there. Return and tell me.
The church, as the reader knows, was just beyond the gates. The footman soon returned.
Mr. Wood is in the vestry, sir, putting on his surplice.
And the carriage?
The horses are harnessing.
We shall not want it to go to the church, but it must be ready the moment we return. All the boxes and luggage arranged and strapped on, and the coachman in his seat.
Yes, sir.
Jane, are you ready?
I rose. There were no groomsmen, no bridesmaids, no relatives to wait for or marshal. None but Mr. Rochester and I. Mrs. Fairfax stood in the hall as we passed. I would have fain have spoken to her, but my hand was held by a grasp of iron. I was hurried along by a stride. I could hardly follow. And to look at Mr. Rochester's face was to feel that not a second of delay would be tolerated for any purpose. I wonder what other bridegroom ever looked as he did, so bent up to a purpose, so grimly resolute, or, under such steadfast brows, ever revealed such flaming and flashing eyes. I know not whether the day was fair or foul. In descending the drive, I gazed neither on sky nor earth. My heart was with my eyes, and both seemed migrated into Mr. Rochester's frame. I wanted to see the invisible thing on which, as we went along, he appeared to fasten a glance fierce and fell. I wanted to feel the thoughts whose force he seemed resting and resisting. At the churchyard wicket he stopped. He discovered I was quite out of breath.
Am I cruel in my love? Delay an instant. Lean on me, Jane.
And now I can recall the picture of the gray old house of God rising calm before me, of a rook wheeling around the steeple, of a ruddy morning sky beyond. I remember something too of the green grave mounds, and I had not forgotten either 2 figures of strangers straying among the low hillocks and reading the mementos graven on the few mossy headstones. I noticed them because as they passed us, as they passed round to the back of the church, and I doubted they were going to enter by the side aisle door and witness the ceremony. By Mr. Rochester, they were not observed. He was earnestly looking at my face, from which the blood had, I dare say, momentarily fled, for I felt my forehead dewy and my cheeks and lips cold. When I rallied, which I soon did, he walked gently with me up the path to the porch. We entered the quiet and humble temple. The priest waited in his white surplice on the lowly altar, the clerk beside him. All was still. 2 shadows only moved in a remote corner. My conjecture had been correct. The strangers had slipped in before us, and they now stood by the vault of the Rochesters, their backs towards us, viewing through the rails the old time-stained marble tomb where a kneeling angel guarded the remains of the Mayor de Rochester, slain at Marston Moor at the time of the Civil Wars, and of Elizabeth, his wife. Our place was taken at the communion rails. Hearing a cautious step behind me, I glanced over my shoulder. One of the strangers, a gentleman evidently, was advancing up the chancel. The service began. The explanation of the intent of matrimony was gone through, and then the clergyman came a step further forward, and bending slightly toward Mr. Rochester, went on.
I require and charge you both, as you will answer at the dreadful day of judgment when the secrets of all hearts shall be disclosed, that if either of you know any impediment why ye may not lawfully be joined together in matrimony, you do now confess it. For you be well assured that so many as are coupled together otherwise than God's word doth allow are not joined together by God, neither is their matrimony lawful.
He paused, as the custom is. When is the pause after that sentence ever broken by reply? Not perhaps once in 100 years. And the clergyman would not lifted his eyes from his book and had held his breath, but for a moment was proceeding. His hand was already stretched towards Mr. Rochester as his lips unclosed to ask,
Wilt thou have this woman for thy wedded wife?
When a distinct and near voice said,
The marriage cannot go on. I declare the existence of an impediment.
The clergyman looked up at the speaker and stood mute. The clerk did the same. Mr. Rochester moved slightly as if an earthquake had rolled under his feet, taking a firmer footing and not turning his head or eyes. He said,
Proceed.
Profound silence fell when he had uttered that word with deep but low intonation. Presently, Mr. Wood said,
I cannot proceed without some investigation into what has been asserted and evidence of its truth or falsehood.
The ceremony is quite broken off. I am in a condition to prove my allegation. An insuperable impediment to this marriage exists.
Mr. Rochester heard, but he did not. He stood stubborn and rigid, making no movement but to possess himself of my hand. What a hot and strong grasp he had, and how like quarried marble was his pale, firm, massive front at this moment. How his eyes shone, still watchful, and yet wild beneath. Mr. Wood seemed at a loss.
What is the nature of the impediment? Perhaps it may be got over, explained away.
Hardly. I have called it insuperable, and I speak advisedly.
The speaker came forward and leaned on the rails. He continued, uttering each word distinctly, calmly, steadily, but not loudly.
It simply consists in the existence of a previous marriage. Mr. Rochester has a wife living now.
My nerves vibrated to those low-spoken words as they had never vibrated to thunder. My blood felt their subtle violence as it had never felt frost or fire, but I was collected, in no danger of swooning. I looked at Mr. Rochester. I made him look at me. His whole face was colorless rock, his eyes both spark and flint. He disavowed nothing. He seemed as if he would defy all things without speaking, without smiling, without seeming to recognize in me a human being. He only twined my waist with his arm and riveted me to his side.
Who are you?
He asked of the intruder.
My name is Briggs, a solicitor of Barrett Street, London.
And you would thrust upon me a wife?
I would remind you of your lady's existence, sir, which the law recognizes if you do not.
Favor me with an account of her, with her name, her parentage, her place of abode.
Certainly.
Mr. Briggs calmly took a paper from his pocket and read out in a sort of official, nasal voice.
I affirm and can prove that on the 20th of October, AD 1799, a date of 15 years back, Edward Fairfax Rochester of Thornfield Hall in the county of Yorkshire and of Ferndean Moor in Derbyshire, England, was married to my sister, Bernard Antoinetta Mason, daughter of Jonas Mason, merchant, and of Antoinetta, his wife, a Creole at St. James's Church, Spanish Town, Jamaica. The record of this marriage will be found in the register of that church. A copy of it is now in my possession, signed Richard Mason.
That, if a genuine document, may prove I have been married, but it does not prove that the woman mentioned therein as my wife is still living.
She was living 3 months ago.
Returned the lawyer.
How do you know?
I have a witness to the fact whose testimony even you, sir, will scarcely controvert.
Produce him or go to hell.
I will produce him first. He is on the spot. Mr. Mason, have the goodness to step forward.
Mr. Rochester, on hearing the name, set his teeth. He experienced, too, a sort of strong convulsive quiver. Near to him as I was, I felt the spasmodic movement of fury or despair run through his frame. The second stranger, who had hitherto lingered in the background, now drew near. A pale face looked over Solicitor's shoulder. Yes, it was Mason himself. Mr. Rochester turned and glared at him. His eye, as I have often said, was a black eye. It now had a tawny, nay, a bloody light in its gloom, and his face flushed olive cheek, and here his forehead received a glow as if from spreading, ascending heart fire, and he stirred and lifted his strong arm. He could have struck Mason, dashed him on the church floor, shocked by ruthless blow to the breath from his body. But Mason shrank away and cried faintly,
Good God.
Contempt fell cool on Mr. Rochester. His passion dried as if a blight had shriveled it up. He only asked,
What
have you
have
to say?
you to say?
An inaudible reply escaped Mason's white lips.
The devil is in it if you cannot answer distinctly. I again demand, what have you to say?
Sir, do not forget you are in a secret place.
Then addressing Mason, he inquired gently,
Are you aware, sir, whether or not this gentleman's wife is still living?
Courage, speak out.
She is now living at Thornfield Hall. I
Said
saw her
Mason.
there last April. I am her brother.
At Thornfield Hall? Impossible. I am an old resident in this neighborhood, sir, and I have never heard of a Mrs. Rochester at Thornfield Hall.
I saw a grim smile contort Mr. Rochester's lips, and he muttered,
No, by God, I take care that none should hear of it, or of her under that name.
He mused. For 10 minutes, he held counsel with himself. He formed his resolve and announced it.
Enough. All shall bolt out at once, like the bullet from the barrel. Wood, close your book and take off your surplice. John Green, leave the church. There will be no wedding today.
The man obeyed. Mr. Rochester continued heartily and recklessly.
Bigamy is an ugly word. I meant, however, to be a bigamist, but fate has outmaneuvered me, or Providence has checked me, perhaps the last. I am little better than a devil at this moment, and, as my pastor there would tell me, deserve no doubt the sternest judgments of God, even to the quenchless fire and deathless worm. Gentlemen, my plan is broken up. What this lawyer and his client say is true. I have been married, and the woman to whom I was married lives. You say you never heard of a Mrs. Rochester at the house up yonder. Would, but I dare say you have many a time inclined your ear to gossip about the mysterious lunatic kept under watch and ward. Some have whispered to you that she is my bastard half-sister, whom I married. Oh, no, sorry. Some, my cast-off mistress. I now inform you that she is my wife, whom I married 15 years ago, Bertha Mason by name, sister of this resolute personage, who is now, with his quivering limbs and white cheeks, showing you what a stout heart men may bear. Cheer up, Dick. Never fear me. I'd almost as soon strike a woman as you. Bertha Mason is mad, and she came of a mad family. idiots and maniacs through 3 generations. Her mother, the Creole, was both a madwoman and a drunkard, as I found out after I had wed the daughter, for they were silent on family secrets before. Bertha, like a dutiful child, copied her parents in both points. I had a charming partner, pure, wise, modest. You can fancy I was a happy man. I went through rich scenes. Oh, my experience has been heavenly if you only knew it, but I owe you no further explanation. Briggs, Wood, Mason, I invite you all to come up to the house and visit Mrs. Poole's patient and my wife. You shall see what sort of a being I was cheated into espousing, and judge whether or not I had a right to break the compact and seek sympathy with something at least human. This girl knew no more than you would of the disgusting secret. She thought all was fair and legal and never dreamt she was going to be entrapped into a feigned union with a debauched wretch, already bound to a bad, mad, and imbruted partner. Come, all of you, follow.
Still holding me fast, he left the church. The 3 gentlemen came after her. At the front door of the hall, we found the carriage.
Take it back to the coach house, John. It will not be wanted today.
At our entrance, Mrs. Fairfax, Adele, Sophie, Leah advanced to meet us and greet us.
To the right about, every soul. Away with your congratulations. Who wants them? Not I. They are 15 years too late.
He passed on and ascended the stairs, still holding my hand and still beckoning the gentlemen to follow him, which they did. We mounted the first staircase, passed up the gallery, proceeded to the 3rd story. The low black door, opened by Mr. Rochester's master key, admitted us to the tapestried room with its great bed and its pictorial cabinet.
You know this place, Mason. She bit and stabbed you here.
He lifted the hangings from the wall, uncovering the 2nd door. This too he opened. In a room without a window, there burnt a fire guarded by a high and strong fender and a lamp suspended from the ceiling by a chain. Grace Poole bent over the fire, apparently cooking something in a saucepan. In the deep shade at the farther end of the room, a figure ran backwards and forwards. What it was, whether beast or human, one could not say at first sight tell. It groveled, seemingly on all fours. It snatched and growled like some strange wild animal, but it was covered with clothing, and a quantity of dark, grizzled hair, wild as a mane, hid its head and face.
Good morrow, Mrs. Poole. How are you? And how was your charge today?
Oh, we're tolerable, sir, I thank you.
Replied Grace, lifting the boiling mess carefully onto the hob.
Rather snappish, but not rageous.
A fierce cry seemed to give the lie to her favorable report. The clothed hyena rose up and stood tall on its hind feet.
Oh, sir, she sees you. You'd better not stay.
Only a few moments, Grace. You must allow me a few moments.
Take care then, sir. For God's sake, take care.
The maniac bellowed. She parted her shaggy locks from her visage and gazed wildly at her visitors. I recognized well that purple face, those bloated features. Mrs. Poole advanced.
Keep out of the way.
And Mr. Rochester thrusting her aside.
She has no knife now, I suppose, and I'm on my guard.
One never knows what she has, sir. She is so cunning. It is not in mortal discretion to fathom her craft.
We had better leave her.
Go to the devil.
Where?
The 3 gentlemen retreated simultaneously. Mr. Rochester flung me behind him. The lunatic sprang and grappled his throat viciously and laid her teeth to his cheek. They struggled. She was a big woman in stature, almost equaling her husband, and corpulent besides. She showed virile force in the contest. More than once, she almost throttled him, athletic as he was. He could have settled her with a well-planted blow, but he would not strike. He would only wrestle. At last he mastered her arms. Grace Poole gave him a cord and he pinioned them behind her. With more rope, which was at hand, he bound her to a chair. The operation was performed amid the fiercest yells and the most lunges. Mr. Rochester then turned to the spectators. He looked at them with a smile, both acrid and desolate.
That is my wife. Such is the sole conjugal embrace I am ever to know. Such are the endearments which are to solace my leisure hours. And this is what I wish to have.
Laying his hand on my shoulder.
This young girl who stands so grave and quiet at the mouth of hell, looking collectedly at the gambols of a demon. I wanted her just as a change after that fierce ragout. Wood and Briggs, look at the difference. Compare these clear eyes with the red balls yonder, this face with that mask, this form with that bulk. Then judge me, priest of the gospel and man of the law, and remember with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. Off with you now, I must shut up my prize.
We all withdrew. Mr. Rochester stayed a moment behind us to give us some further order to Grace Poole. The solicitor addressed me as he descended the stair.
You, madam, are cleared from all blame. Your uncle will be glad to hear it, if indeed he should still be living, when Mr. Mason returns to Madeira.
My uncle? What of him? Do you know him?
Mr. Mason does. Mr. Eyre has been the functional correspondent of this house, his house for some years. When your uncle received your letter intimidating the contemplated union between yourself and Mr. Rochester, Mr. Mason, who is staying at Madeira to recruit his health on the way to Jamaica, happened to be with him. Mr. Eyre mentioned the intelligence, for you knew that my client here was acquainted with a gentleman of the name of Rochester. Mr. Mason, astonished and distressed, as you may suppose, revealed the real state of matters. Your uncle, I am sorry to say, is now in a sickbed, from which, considering the nature of its disease, decline, and the stage it has reached, it is unlikely he will ever rise. He could not then hasten to England himself to extricate you from the snare into which you had fallen, but he implored Mr. Mason to lose no time in taking steps to prevent the false marriage. He referred him to me for assistance. I used all dispatch and am thankful I was not too late, as you doubtless must also be. Were I not mortally certain that your uncle will be dead ere you reach Madeira, I would advise you to accompany Mr. Mason back. But as it is, I think you had better remain in England till you can hear further, either from or of Mr. Eyre. Have we anything else to stay for?
No. Let us be gone.
Without waiting to take leave of Mr. Rochester, they made their exit at the hall door. The clergyman stayed to exchange a few sentences, either of admonition or reproof, with his haughty parishioner. This duty done, he too departed. I heard him go as I stood at the half-open door of my own room, to which I had now withdrawn. The house cleared, I shut myself in, fastening the bolt that none might intrude, and proceeded not to weep, not to mourn. I was yet too calm for that, but mechanically to take off the wedding dress and replace it by the stuff gown I had worn yesterday. As I thought for the last time, I then sat down. I felt weak and tired. I leaned my arms on the table and my head drooped on them. And now I thought, till now I had only heard, seen, moved, followed up and down where I was led or dragged, watched event rush on event, disclosure open upon disclosure. But now I thought the morning had been a quiet morning enough, all except the brief scene with the lunatic. The transaction in the church had not been noisy. There was no explosion of passion, no loud altercation, no dispute, no defiance or challenge, no tears, no sobs. A few words had been spoken, a calmly pronounced objection to the marriage made, some stern, short questions put by Mr. Rochester, answers, explanations given, evidence adduced, and an open admission of the truth had been uttered by my master. Then the living proof had been seen. The intruders were gone, and all was over. And I was in my own room as usual, just myself, without obvious change. Nothing had smitten me or scathed me or named me, and yet, where was the Jane Eyre of yesterday? Where was her life? Where her prospects? Jane Eyre, who had been an ardent, expectant woman, almost a bride, was a cold, solitary girl again. Her life was pale. Her prospects were desolate. A Christmas frost had come in midsummer. A white December storm had whirled over June. Ice glazed the ripe apples. Drifts crushed the blowing roses. On hayfield and cornfield lay a frozen shroud. Lanes which last night blushed full of flowers, today were pathless with untrodden snow, and the woods which 12 hours since waved leafy and fragrant as groves between the tropics now spread waste, wild and white as pine forests in wintry Norway. My hopes were all dead, struck with a subtle doom such as in one night fell on all the firstborn of the land of Egypt. I looked on my cherished wishes, yesterday so blooming and glowing. They lay stark, chill, livid corpses that could never revive. I looked at my love, that feeling which was my master's, which he had created. It shivered in my heart like a suffering child in a cold cradle. Sickness and anguish had seized it. It could not seize Mr. Rochester's arms. It could not derive warmth from his breast. Oh, never more could it turn to him, for faith was blighted, confidence destroyed. Mr. Rochester was not to me what he had been. He was not what I had thought him. I would not ascribe vice to him. I would not say he had betrayed me. But the attribute of stainless truth was gone from his idea, and from his presence I must go. That I perceived well. When, how, whither, I could not yet discern. But he himself, I doubted not, would hurry me from Thornfield. Real affection, it seemed, he could not have for me. It had only been a fitful passion, and that was balked. He would want me no more. I should fear even to cross his path now. My view must be hateful to him. Oh, how blind had been my eyes, how weak my conduct. My eyes were covered and closed. Edifying darkness seemed to swim round me, and reflection came in as black and confused a flow. Self-abandoned, relaxed and effortless, I seemed to have me laid down in the dried-up bed of a great river. I heard a flood loosened in remote mountains and felt the torrent come. To rise I had no will. To flee I had no strength. I lay faint, longing to be dead. One idea still throbbed lifelike within me, a remembrance of God, begot in unuttered prayer. These words went wandering up and down in my rayless mind as something that should be whispered, but no energy was found to express them.
Be not far from me, for trouble is near. There is none to help.
It was near, as I had lifted no petition to heaven to avert it, as I had neither joined my hand nor bent my knees, nor moved my lips. It came in full heavy swing, the torrent poured over me, the whole consciousness of my life lorn, my love lost, my hope quenched, my faith's depth struck, swayed full and mightily above me in one sullen mass. That bitter hour cannot be described. In truth,
The waters came into my soul. I sank in deep mire. I felt no standing. I came into deep waters. The floods overflowed me.
Chapter 27. Sometime in the afternoon, I raised my head and looked around, and seeing the western sun gilding the sign of its decline on the wall, I asked,
What am I to do?
but the answer my mind gave
Leave Thornfield at once.
was so prompt, so dread that I stopped my ears. I said I could not bear such words now.
That I am not Edward Rochester's bride is the least part of my woe. That I have wakened out of most glorious dreams and found them all void and vain is a horror I could bear and master. But that I must leave him decidedly, instantly, entirely is intolerable. I cannot do it.
But then a voice within me averred that I could do it, and foretold that I should do it. I wrestled with my own resolution. I wanted to be weak that I might avoid the awful passage of further suffering. I saw laid out for me, and conscience turns tyrant, held passion by the throat, told her tauntingly she had yet but dipped her dainty foot in the slough, and swore that with that arm of iron he would thrust her down to unsigned depths of agony.
Let me be torn away then. Let another help me. No, you shall tear yourself away. None shall help you. You shall yourself pluck out your right eye, yourself cut off your right hand. Your heart shall be the victim, and you the priest to transfix it.
I rose up suddenly, terror-struck at the solitude which so ruthless a judge haunted, at the silence which so awful a voice filled. My head swam as I stood erect. I perceived that I was sickening from excitement in an admission. Neither meat nor drink had passed my lips that day, for I had taken no breakfast. And with a strange pang, I reflected that long as I had been shut up here, no message had been sent to ask how I was, or to invite me to come down. Not even little Adele had tapped at the door. Not even Mrs. Fairfax had sought me.
Friends always forget those whom fortune forsakes,
I murmured as I undrew the bolt and passed out. I stumbled over an obstacle. My head was still dizzy, my sight was dim, and my limbs were feeble. I could not soon recover myself. I fell, but not onto the ground. An outstretched arm caught me. I looked up. I was supported by Mr. Rochester, who sat in a chair across my chamber threshold.
You come out at last. Well, I have been waiting for you long and listening. Yet not one movement have I heard, nor one sob. 5 minutes more of that death-like hush, and I should have forced the lock like a burglar. So you shun me? You shut yourself up and grieve alone? I would rather you had come and upbraided me with vehemence. You are passionate. I expected a scene of some kind. I was prepared for the hot rain of tears. Only I wanted them to be shed on my breast. Now its senseless form has received them. Or your drenched handkerchief. But I err, you have not wept at all. I see a white cheek and a faded eye, but no trace of tears. I suppose then your heart has been weeping blood? Well, Jane, not a word of reproach, nothing bitter, nothing poignant, nothing to cut a feeling or sting a passion. You sit quietly where I have placed you and regard me with a weary, passive look. Jane, I never meant to wound you thus. If the man who had been but one little ewe lamb that was dear to him as a daughter, that ate of his bread and drank of his cup and lay in his bosom, had by some mistake slaughtered it at the shambles, he would not have rued his bloody blunder more than I now rue mine. Will you ever forgive me?
Reader, I forgave him at the moment, and on the spot. There was such deep remorse in his eyes, such true pity in his tone, such manly energy in his manner, and besides, there was such unchanged love in his whole look and mien. I forgave him all, yet not in words, not outwardly, only at my heart's core.
You know I am a scoundrel, Jane.
Ere long he inquired wistfully, wondering, I suppose, at my continued silence and tameness, the result rather of weakness than of will.
Yes, sir.
Then tell me, so roundly and sharply, don't spare me.
I cannot. I am tired and sick. I want some water.
He heaved a sort of shuddering sigh, and taking me in his arms, carried me downstairs. At first I did not know to what room he had borne me. All was cloudy to my glazed sight. Presently I saw the reviving warmth of a fire, for summer as it was, I had become icy cold in my chamber. He put wine to my lips, I tasted and revived. Then I ate something he offered me, and soon was myself. I was in the library, sitting in his chair. He was quite near.
If I could go out of life now without too sharp a pang, it would be well for me.
I thought.
Then I should not have to make the effort of cracking my heartstrings and rending them from among Mr. Rochester's. I must leave him. I do not want to leave him. I cannot leave him.
How are you now, Jane?
Much better, sir. I shall be well soon.
Taste the wine again, Jane.
I obeyed him. Then he put the glass on the table, stood before me. He looked at me attentively. Suddenly he turned away with an inarticulate exclamation, full of passionate emotion of some kind. He walked fast through the room and came back. He stooped towards me. as if to kiss me. But I remember caresses were not forbidden. I turned my face away and put his aside.
What? How is this? Oh, I know. You won't kiss the husband of Bertha Mason. You consider my arms filled and my embraces appropriated.
At any rate, there is neither room nor claim for me, sir.
Why, Jane, I will spare you the trouble of much talking. I will answer for you. Because I have a wife already, you would reply, I guess, rightly.
Yes.
If you think so, you must have a strange opinion of me. You must regard me as a plotting profligate, a base and low rake who has been simulating disinterested love in order to draw you into a snare deliberately laid and strip you of honor and rob you of self-respect. What do you say to that? I can see you say nothing. In the first place, you are faint still and have enough to do to draw your breath. In the second place, you cannot yet accustom yourself to accuse and revile me, and besides, the floodgates of tears are opened, and they would rush you out if you spoke much. And if you have no desire to expostulate, to upbraid, to make a scene, you are thinking how to act, talking. You consider it as of no use. I know you. I am on my guard.
Sir, I do not wish to act against you.
And my unsteady voice warned me to curtail my sentence.
Not in your sense of the word, but in mine. You are scheming to destroy me. You have as good as said that I am a married man. As a married man, you will shun me, keep me out of my way. Just now you have refused to kiss me. You intend to make yourself a complete stranger to me, to live under this roof only as Adele's governess. If I ever say a friendly word to you, if ever a friendly feeling inclines you again to me, you will say, that man had nearly made me his mistress. I must be ice and rock to him, and ice and rock you will accordingly become.
I cleared and steadied my voice to reply.
All is changed about me, sir. I must change too. There is no doubt of that. And to avoid fluctuations of feeling and continual combats with recollections and associations, there is only one way. Adele must have a new governess, sir.
Oh, Adele will go to school. I have settled that already. Nor do I mean to torment you with the hideous associations and recollections of Thornfield Hall. This accursed place, this tent of Aachen, this insolent vault, offering the ghastliness of living death to the light of the open sky, this narrow stone hall with its one real fiend, worse than a legion of such as we imagine. Jane, you shall not stay here, nor will I. I was wrong ever to bring you to Thornfield Hall, knowing as I did how it was haunted. I charged them to conceal from you before I ever saw you all knowledge of the curse of the place, merely because I feared Adele never would have a governess to stay if she knew with what inmate she was housed, and my plans would not permit me to remove the maniac elsewhere. Though I possess an old house, Ferndine Manor, even more retired and hidden than this, where I could have lodged her safely enough, had not a scruple about the unhealthiness of the situation, in the heart of a wood, made my conscience recoil from the arrangement. Probably those damp walls would soon have eased me of her charge, but to each villain his own vice, and mine is not a tendency to indirect assassination, even of what I most hate. Concealing the mad woman's neighborhood from you, however, was something like covering a child with a cloak and laying it down upon a upas tree. That demon's vicinage is poisoned and always was. But I'll shut up Thornfield Hall, I'll nail up the front door and board the lower windows. I'll give Mrs. Poole $200 a year to live there with my wife, as you term that fearful hag. Grace will do much for money, and she'll have her son, the keeper at Grimsley Retreat, to bear her company and to be her hand to give her aid in the paroxysms, where my wife is prompted by her familiar to burn people in their beds at night, to stab them, to bite their flesh from their bones, and so on.
Sir, you are inexorable for that unfortunate lady. You speak of her with hate, with vindictive antipathy. It is cruel. She cannot help being mad.
Jane, my little darling, so I will call you, for so you are. You don't know what you are talking about. You misjudge me again. It is not because she is mad I hate her. If you were mad, do you think I should hate you?
I do indeed, sir.
Then you are mistaken and know nothing about me and nothing about the sort of love which I am capable. Every atom of your flesh is as dear to me as my own. In pain and sickness it would still be dear. Your mind is my treasure, and if it were broken, it would be my treasure still. If you raved, my arms should confine you, and not a straight waistcoat. Your grasp, even in fury, would have a charm for me. If you flew at me as wildly as that woman did this morning, I should receive you in an embrace, at least as fond as it would be restrictive. I should not shrink from you with disgust as I did from her. In your quiet moments, you should have no watcher and no nurse but me, and I could hang over you with untiring tenderness, though you gave me no smile in return, and never weary of gazing into your eyes, though they had no longer a ray of recognition for me. But why do I follow that train of ideas? I was talking of removing you from Thornfield. All you know is prepared for prompt departure. Tomorrow you shall go. I only ask you to endure one more night under this roof, Jane, and then farewell to its miseries and terrors forever. I have a place to repair to, which will be a secure sanctuary from hateful reminiscences, from unwelcome intrusion, even from falsehood and slander.
And take Adele with you, sir. She will be a companion for you.
What do you mean, Jane? I told you I would send Adele to school, and what do I want with a child for a companion, and not my own child, a French dancer's bastard? Why do you importune me about her? I say, why do you assign Adele to me for a companion?
You spoke of a retirement, sir, and retirement and solitude are dull, too dull for you.
Solitude. I see I must come to an explanation. I don't know what sphinx-like expression is forming in your countenance. You are to share my solitude. Do you understand?
I shook my head. It required a degree of courage, excited as he was becoming, even to risk that mute sign of dissent. He had been walking fast about the room, and he stopped as he suddenly rooted to one spot. He looked at me long and hard. I turned my eyes from him, fixed them on the fire, and tried to assume and maintain a quiet, collected aspect.
Now for the hitch in Jane's character,
he said at last, speaking more calmly, and from his look I had expected him to speak.
The reel of silk has run smoothly enough so far, but I always knew there would come a knot and a puzzle. Here it is. Now for vexation and exasperation and endless trouble. By God, I long to exert a fraction of Samson's strength and break the entanglement like tow.
He recommenced his walk, but soon again stopped, and this time just before me.
Jane, will you hear reason?
He stooped and approached his lips to my ear.
Because if you won't, I'll try violence.
His voice was hoarse. His look that of a man who had just about to burst in an insufferable bound and plunge headlong into wild license. I saw that in another moment, and with one more impetus of frenzy more, I should be able to do nothing with him. The present, the passing second of time was all I had in which to control and restrain him. A movement of repulsion, like fear, would have sealed my doom, and his. But I was not afraid, not in the least. I felt an inward power, a sense of influence, which supported me. The crisis was perilous, but not without its charm, such as the Indian perhaps feels when he slips over the rapid in his canoe. I took hold of his clenched hand, loosened the contorted fingers, and said to him soothingly,
Sit down. I'll talk to you as long as you like and hear all you have to say, whether reasonable or unreasonable.
He sat down, but he did not get leave to speak directly. I had been struggling with tears for some time. I had taken great pains to repress them because I knew he would not like to see me weep. Now, however, I considered it well to let them flow as freely and as long as they liked. If the flood annoyed him, so much the better. So I gave way and cried heartily. Soon I heard him earnestly entreating me to be composed. I said I could not while he was in such a passion.
But I am not angry, Jane. I only love you too well. And if you had steeled your little pale face with a resolute frozen look, I could not endure it. Hush now and wipe your eyes.
His softened voice announced that he was subdued, so I, in my turn, became calm. Now he made an effort to rest his head on my shoulder, but I would not permit it. Then he would draw me to him. No.
Jane.
He said, with such an accent of bitter sadness, it thrilled along every nerve I had.
You don't love me then. It was only my station and the rank of my wife that you valued. Now that you think me disqualified to become your husband, you recoil from my touch as if I were some toad or ape.
These words cut me. If what could I do or say? I ought probably to have done or said nothing, but I was so tortured by a sense of remorse at thus hurting his feelings, I could not control the wish to drop balm where I had wounded.
I do love you more than ever, but I must not show or indulge the feeling, and this is the last time I must express it.
The last time, Jane, what, do you think you can live with me and see me daily, and yet, if you still love me, be always cold and distant?
No, sir, that I am certain I could not, and therefore I see there is but one way, but you will be furious if I mention it.
Oh, mention it. If I storm, you have the art of weeping.
Mr. Rochester, I must leave you.
For how long, Jane? For a few minutes while you smooth your hair, which is somewhat disheveled, and bathe your face, which looks feverish?
I must leave Adele and Thornfield. I must part with you for my whole life. I must begin a new existence among strange faces and strange scenes.
Of course, I told you you should. I pass over the madness about parting from me. You mean you must become part of me. As to the new existence, it is all right. You shall yet be my wife. I am not married. You shall be Mrs. Rochester, both virtually and nominally. I shall keep only to you so long as you and I live. You shall go to a place I have in the south of France, a whitewashed villa on the shores of the Mediterranean. There you shall live a happy and guarded and most innocent life. Never fear that I wish to lure you into error, to make you my mistress. Why did you shake your head? Jane, you must be reasonable, or I, in truth, shall again become frantic.
His voice and hand quivered, his large nostrils dilated, his eye blazed still. I dared to speak.
Sir, your wife is living. That is a fact, acknowledged this morning by yourself. If I lived with you as you desire, I should then be your mistress. To say otherwise is sophistical, is false.
Jane, I am not a gentle-tempered man. You forget that. I am not long enduring. I am not cool and dispassionate. Out of pity to me and yourself, put your finger on my pulse. Feel how it throbs, and beware.
He bared his wrist and offered it to me. The blood was forsaking his cheek and lips. They were growing livid. I was distressed on all hands. To agitate him this deeply by resistance he so abhorred, it was cruel. To yield was out of the question. I did what human beings do instinctively when they are driven to utter extremity. Look for aid to one higher than man. The words
God help me
burst involuntarily from my lips.
I am a fool. I keep telling her I am not married and do not explain to her why. I forget she knows nothing of the character of that woman or of the circumstance attending my infernal union with her. Oh, I am certain Jane will agree with me in opinion when she knows all that I know. Just put your hand in mine, Janet, that I may have the evidence of touch as well as sight to prove you are near me, and I will in a few words show you the real state of the case. Can you listen to me?
Yes, sir, for hours, if you will.
I ask only minutes, Jane. Did you ever hear or know that I was not the eldest son of my house, that I once had a brother older than I?
I remember Mrs. Fairfax told me so once.
And did you ever hear that my father was an avaricious, grasping man?
I have understood something to that effect.
Well, Jane, being so, it was his resolution to keep the property together. He could not bear the idea of dividing his estate and leaving me a fair portion. All he resolved should go to my brother Rowland. Yet as little could he endure that a son of his should be a poor man. I must be provided for by a wealthy marriage. He sought me a partner betimes. Mr. Mason, a West India planter and merchant, was his old acquaintance. He was certain his possessions were real and vast. He made inquiries. Mr. Mason, he found, had a son and daughter, and he learned from him that he could and would give the latter a fortune of £30,000. That sufficed. When I left college, I was sent out to Jamaica to espouse a bride already courted for me. My father said nothing about her money, but he told me Miss Mason was the boast of Spanish Town for her beauty. And this was no lie. I found her to be a fine woman in the style of Blanche Ingram, tall, dark, and majestic. Her family wished to secure me because I was of good race, and so did she. They showed her to me in parties, splendidly dressed. I seldom saw her alone and had very little private conversation with her. She flattered me and lavishly displayed for my pleasure her charms and accomplishments. All the men in her circle seemed to admire her and envy me. I was dazzled, stimulated, my senses were excited, and being ignorant, raw, and inexperienced, I thought I loved her. There's no folly so besotted that the idiotic rivalries of society, the prurience, the rashness, the blindness of youth will not hurry a man to his commission. Her relatives encouraged me, competitors piqued me, she allured me. A marriage was achieved almost before I knew where I was. Oh, I have no respect for myself when I think of that act. An agony of inward contempt masters me. I never loved, I never esteemed, I did not even know her. I was not sure of the existence of one virtue in her nature. I had marked neither modesty, nor benevolence, nor candor, nor refinement in her mind or manners, and I married her. Gross, groveling, mole-eyed blockhead that I was. With less sin I might have, but let me remember to whom I am speaking. My bride's mother I had never seen. I understood she was dead. The honeymoon over, I learned my mistake. She was only mad and shut up in a lunatic asylum. There was a younger brother, too, a complete dumb idiot. The elder one, whom you have seen and whom I cannot hate whilst I abhor all his kindred, because he has some grains of affection in his feeble mind, shown in the continued interest he takes in his wretched sister, and also in a dog-like attachment he once bore me, will probably be in the same state one day. My father and my brother Roland knew all this, but they thought only of the 30,000 pounds and joined in the plot against me. These were vile discoveries, but except for the treachery of concealment, I should have made them no subject of reproach to my wife, even when I found her nature wholly alien to mine, her tastes obnoxious to me, her cast of uncommon, low, narrow, and singularly inescapable of being led to anything higher, expanded to anything larger. When I found that I could not pass a single evening, nor even a single hour of the day with her in comfort, that kindly conversation could not be sustained between us, because whatever topic I started immediately received from her a turn at once coarse and trite, perverse and imbecile, which I perceived that I should never have a quiet or settled household, because no servant would ever hear the continued outbreaks of her violent and unreasonable temper, or the vexations of her absurd, contradictory, exacting orders. Even then, I restrained myself. I eschewed upbraiding. I curtailed remonstrance. I tried to devour my repentance and disgust in secret. I repressed the deep antipathy I felt. Jane, I will not trouble you with abominable details. Some strong words will express what I have to say. I lived with that woman upstairs 4 years, and before that time she had tried me indeed. Her character ripened and developed with frightful rapidity. Her vices sprang up fast and rank. They were so strong, only cruelty could check them, and I would not use cruelty. What a pygmy intellect she had, and what a giant propensities. How fearful were the curses those propensities entailed on me. Bertha Mason, the true daughter of an infamous mother, dragged me through all the hideous and degrading agonies which must attend a man bound to a wife at once intemperate and unchaste. My brother in the interval was dead, and at the end of the 4 years my father died too. I was rich enough now, yet poor to hideous indignance. A nature most gross, impure, depraved I ever saw was associated with mine, and called by the law and by society a part of me. And I could not rid myself of it by any legal proceedings, for the doctors now discovered that my wife was mad. Her excesses had prematurely developed the germs of insanity. Jane, you don't like my narrative. You look almost sick. Shall I defer the rest to another day?
No, sir, finish it now. I pity you. I do earnestly pity you.
Pity, Jane, from some people is a noxious and insulting sort of tribute, which one is justified in hurling back in the teeth of those who offer it. But that is the sort of pity native to callous, selfish hearts. It is a hybrid, egotistical pain at hearing of woes, crossed with ignorant contempt for those who have endured them. But that is not your pity, Jane. It is not the feeling for which your whole face is full at this moment, with which your eyes are now almost overflowing, with which your heart is heaving, with which your hand is trembling in mine. Your pity, my darling, is the suffering mother of love. Its anguish is the very natal pang of the divine passion. I accept it, Jane. Let the daughter have free advent. My arms wait to receive her.
Now, sir, proceed. What did you do when you found she was mad?
Jane, I approached the verge of despair. A remnant of self-respect was all that intervened between me and the gulf. In the eyes of the world, I was doubtless covered with grimy dishonor. But I resolved to be clean in my own sight, and to the last. I repudiated the contamination of her crimes, and wrenched myself from connection with her mental defects. Still, society associated my name and person with hers. I yet saw her and heard her daily, something of her breath, mixed with the air I breathed, and besides I remembered I had once been her husband. That recollection was then and is now inexpressibly odious to me. Moreover, I knew that while she lived, I could never
So we are having technical difficulties. Unfortunately, I was having technical difficulties as the swing and was kicked out moments ago from our Zoom and was trying to get back in. So if one of you can tell me which page we're on, I will take over as Mr. Rochester, but I missed the last couple of minutes.
Page 250, about
Okay.
toward the bottom of the page, Jane, I approach the verge of despair.
Okay, that is where we will start then. And it looks like we've lost some people, so I will keep an eye on the participants as well and let them back in as they can. So I apologize, everyone. Okay, Jane, I approached the verge of despair. A remnant of self-respect was all that intervened between me and the gulf. In the eyes of the world, I was doubtless covered with grimy dishonor. But I resolved to be clean in my own sight, and to the last I repudiated the contamination of her crimes and wrenched myself from connection with her mental defects. Still, society associated my name and person with hers. I yet saw her and heard her daily. Something of her breath mixed with the air I breathed. And besides, I remembered I had once been her husband. That recollection was then and is now inexpressibly odious to me. Moreover, I knew that while she lived, I could never be the husband of another and better wife. And though 5 years my senior, her family and her father had lied to me, even in the particular of her age, she was likely to live as long as I, being as robust in frame as she was infirm in mind. Thus, at the age of 26, I was hopeless. One night, I had been awakened by her yells. Since the medical men had pronounced her mad, she had, of course, been shut up. It was a fiery West Indian night, one of the description that frequently precede the hurricanes of those climates. Being unable to sleep in bed, I got up and opened the window. The air was like sulfur streams. I could find no refreshment anywhere. Mosquitoes buzzing in and hummed sullenly around the room. The sea, which I could hear from thence, rumbled dull like an earthquake. Black clouds were casting up over it. The moon was setting in the waves, broad and red like a hot cannonball. She threw her last bloody glance over a world quivering with the ferment of tempest. I was physically influenced by the atmosphere and scene, and my ears were filled with the curses the maniac still shrieked out, wherein she momentarily mingled my name with such a tone of demon hate, with such language. No professed harlot ever had a fouler vocabulary than she, though 2 rooms off, I heard every word, the thin partitions of the West India house opposing but slight obstruction to her wolfish cries. This life is hell. This is the air. Those are the sounds of the bottomless pit. I have a right to deliver myself from it if I can. The sufferings of this mortal state will leave me with the heavy flesh that now encumbers my soul. Of the fanatic's burning eternity, I have no fear. There is not a future state worse than this present one. Let me break away and go home to God. I said this whilst I knelt down at and unlocked a trunk which contained a brace of loaded pistols. We have our Rochester joining us again. So I will continue. Bill, I'm going to finish this speech. It is in the middle of 251, and then you can jump in. I said this whilst I knelt down at and unlocked a trunk which contained a brace of loaded pistols. I meant to shoot myself. I only entertained the intention for a moment, for not being insane, the crisis of exquisite and unalloyed despair, which had originated the wish and design of self-destruction, was past in a second. Would you like to resume in 251, Bill?
No, I need a few minutes.
Okay, I will continue.
Thank
Just
you.
put in the chat when you're ready to take over. A wind fresh from Europe blew over the ocean and rushed through the open casement. The storm broke, streamed, thundered, blazed, and the air grew pure. I then framed and fixed a resolution while I walked under the dripping orange trees of my wet garden and amongst its drenched pomegranates and pineapples, and while the refulgent dawn of the tropics kindled round me, I reasoned thus, Jane. And now listen, for it was true wisdom that consoled me in that hour and showed me the right path to follow. The sweet wind from Europe was still whispering in the refreshed leaves, and the Atlantic was thundering in glorious liberty. My heart, dried up and scorched from a long time, swelled to the tone and filled with living blood. My being longed for renewal. My soul thirsted for a pure draught. I sought hope revived and felt regeneration possible. From flowery arch at the bottom of my garden, I gazed over the sea, bluer than the sky. The old world was beyond. Clear prospects opened thus. Go, said hope, and live again in Europe. There is not known what a sullied, it is not known there what a sullied name you bear, nor what a filthy burden is bound to you. You may take the maniac with you to England, confine her with due attendance and precautions at Thornfield, then travel yourself to what clime you will, and form what new tie you like. That woman who has so abused your long suffering, so sullied your name, so outraged your honor, so blighted your youth, is not your wife, nor are you her husband. See that she is cared for as her condition demands, and you have done all that God and humanity require of you. Let her identity, her connection with yourself, be buried in oblivion. You are bound to impart them to no living being. Place her in safety and comfort, shelter her degradation with secrecy, and leave her. I acted precisely on this suggestion. My father and brother had not made my marriage known to their acquaintance because in the very first letter I wrote to apprise them of the union, having already begun to experience extreme disgust of its consequences, and from the family character and constitution, seeing a hideous future opening to me, I added an urgent charge to keep it secret. And very soon, the infamous conduct of the wife my father had selected for me was such to make him blush to own her as his daughter-in-law. Far from desiring to publish the connection, he became as anxious to conceal it as myself. To England then, I conveyed her. A fearful voyage I had with such a monster in the vessel. Glad was I when I at last got her to Thornfield and saw her safely lodged in that third-story room, of whose secret inner cabinet she has now for 10 years made a wild beast den, a goblin cell. I had some trouble in finding an attendant for her, as it was necessary to select one on whose fidelity dependence could be placed, for her ravings would inevitably betray my secret. Besides, she had lucid intervals of days, sometimes weeks, which she filled up with abuse of me. At last I hired Grace Poole from the Grimsby retreat. She and the surgeon, Carter, who dressed Mason's wounds that night, he was stabbed and worried, are the only two I've ever admitted into my confidence. Mrs. Fairfax may indeed have suspected something, but she could have gained no precise knowledge as to facts. Grace has, on the whole, proved a good keeper. Though, owing partly to a fault of her own, of which it appears nothing can cure her, and which is incident to her harassing profession, Her vigilance has been more than once lulled and baffled. The lunatic is both cunning and malignant. She has never failed to take advantage of her guardian's temporary lapses, once to secret the knife with which she stabbed her brother, and twice to possess herself of the key of her cell and issue therefrom in the nighttime. On the first of these occasions, she perpetrated the attempt to burn me in my bed. On the second, she paid that ghastly visit to you. I thank Providence, who watched over you, that she then spent her fury on your wedding apparel, which perhaps brought back vague reminiscences of her own bridal days. But on what might have happened, I cannot endure to reflect. When I think of the thing which flew at my throat this morning, hanging its black and scarlet visage over the nest of my dove, my blood curdles.
And what, sir, did you do when you had settled her here? Where did you go?
What did I do, Jane? I transformed myself into a will-o'-the-wisp. Where did I go? I pursued wanderings as wild of those as the March spirit. I sought the continent and went devious through all its lands. My fixed desire was to seek and find a good and intelligent woman whom I could love, a contrast to the fury I left in Thornfield.
But you could not marry, sir.
I had determined and was convinced that I could and ought. It was not my original intention to deceive, as I have deceived you. I meant to tell my tale plainly and make my proposals openly, and it appeared to me so absolutely rational that I should be considered free to love and be loved. I never doubted some woman might be found willing and able to understand my case and accept me, in spite of the curse with which I was burdened.
Well, sir?
When you are inquisitive, Jane, you always make me smile. You open your eyes like an eager bird and make every now and then a restless movement as if answers and speech should not flow fast enough for you, and you wanted to read the tablet of one's heart. But before I go on, tell me what you mean by your well, sir. Is it a small phrase? It is a small phrase very frequent with you, and which many a time has drawn me on and on through interminable talk. I don't very well know why.
I mean, what next? How did you proceed? What came of such an event?
Precisely. And what do you wish to know now?
Whether you found anyone you liked, whether you asked her to marry you, and what she said.
I can tell you whether I found one I liked and whether I asked her to marry me, for what she said is yet to be recorded in the book of fate. For 10 long years, I roved about, living first in one capital, then another, sometimes in St. Petersburg, oftener in Paris, occasionally in Rome, Naples, and Florence. Provided with plenty of money and the passport of an old name, I could choose my own society. No circles were closed to me. I sought my ideal of a woman amongst English ladies, French countesses, Italian signoras, and German Gaffinen. I could not find her. Sometimes, for a fleeting moment, I thought I caught a glance, heard a tone, beheld a form which announced the realization of my dream. But I was presently undeceived. You are not to suppose that I desired perfection. Sorry. Either of mind or person. I longed only for what suited me, for the antipodes of the Creole, and I longed vainly. Amongst them all, I found not one whom had I ever been so free, I warned as I was of the risks, the horrors, the loathings of incongruous unions, would have asked to marry me. Disappointment made me reckless. I tried dissipation, never debauchery. That I hated and hate. That was my Indian Messalina's attribute, rooted disgust at it, and her restrained me much even in pleasure. Any enjoyment that bordered on riot seemed to approach me to her and her vices, and I eschewed it. Yet I could not live alone, so I tried the companionship of mistresses. I first chose Celine Véron, another of those steps which make a man spurn himself when he recalls them. You already know what she was and how my liaison with her terminated. She had two successors, an Italian, Giancina, and a German, Clara, both considered singularly handsome. What was their beauty to me in a few weeks? Giancina was unprincipled and violent. I tired of her in 3 months. Clara was honest and quiet, but heavy, mindless, and unimpressionable, not one whit to my taste. I was glad to give her a sufficient sum to set her up in a good line of business and so get decently rid of her. But Jane, I see by your face you are not forming a very favorable opinion of me just now. You think me an unfeeling, loose principle rake, don't you?
I don't like you so well as I have done sometimes, indeed, sir. Did it not seem to you in the least wrong to live in that way, first with one mistress and then another? You talk of it as a mere matter of course.
It was with me, and I did not like it. It was a groveling fashion of existence. I should never like to return to it. Hiring a mistress is the next worst thing to buying a slave. We are on 254, Bill, and when I'm done with this paragraph, you can jump in if you want to. Both are often by nature and always by position inferior, and to live familiarly with inferiors is degrading. I now hate the recollection of the time I passed with Celine, Giancina, and Clara.
I felt the truth of these words, and I drew from them the certain inference that if I were so far to forget myself and all the teaching that ever had been instilled into me as, under any pretext, with any justification, to any temptation, to become the successor of these poor girls, he would one day regard me with the same feeling which now in his mind desecrated their memory. I did not give utterance to this conviction. It was enough to feel it. I impressed it on my heart that it might remain there to serve me as aid in the time of trial.
Now, Jane, why don't you say, well, sir? I have not done. You are looking grave. You disapprove of me still, I see. But let me come to the point. Last January, rid of all mistresses in a harsh, bitter frame of mind, the result of a useless, roving, lonely life, corroded with disappointment, sourly disposed against all men and especially against all womankind. For I began to regard the notion of an intellectual, faithful, loving woman as a mere dream. Recalled by business, I came back to England. On a frosty winter afternoon, I rode in sight of Thornfield Hall, a bored spot. I expected no peace, no pleasure there. On a stile in Hay Lane, I saw a quiet little figure sitting by itself. I passed it as negligently as I did the parlour window opposite it. I had no presentiment of what it would be to me, no inward warning that the arbitress of my life, my genius for good or evil, waited there in humble guise. I did not know it even when on the occasion of Miss Rohr's accident, it came up and gravely offered me help. Childish and slender creature. It seemed as if a linnet had hopped to my foot and proposed to bear me on its tiny wing. I was surly, but the thing would not go. It stood by me with strange perseverance and looked and spoke with a sort of authority. I must be aided, and by that hand, and aided I was. When once I had pressed the frail shoulder, something new, a fresh sap and sense, stole into my frame. It was as well I had learned that this elf must return to me, that it belonged to my house down below, or I could not have felt it pass away from under my hand and seen it vanish behind the dim hedge without singular regret. I heard you come home that night, Jane, though you probably were not aware that I thought of you or watched for you. The next day I observed you, myself unseen for half an hour while you played with Adele in the gallery. It was a snowy day, I recollect, and you could not go out of doors. I was in my room. The door was ajar. I could both listen and watch. Adele claimed your outward attention for a while, yet I fancy your thoughts were elsewhere. But you were very patient with her. My little Jane, you talked to her and amused her a long time. When at last she left you, you lapsed at once into deep reverie. You betook yourself slowly to pace the gallery. Now and then, in in passing a casement, you glanced out at the thick falling snow. You listened to the sobbing wind, and again you paced gently on and dreamed. I think those day visions were not dark. There was a pleasurable illumination in your eye occasionally, a soft excitement in your aspect which told of no bitter, bilious hypochondriac brooding. Your look revealed rather the sweet musings of youth, when its spirit follows on willing wings the flight of hope up and on to an ideal heaven. The voice of Mrs. Fairfax speaking to a servant in the hall wakened you, and how curiously you smiled, and at yourself, Janet. There was much sense in your smile. It was very shrewd and seemed to make light of your own abstraction. It seemed to say, my fine visions are all very well, but I must not forget they're absolutely unreal. I have a rosy sky and a green flowery Eden in my brain, but without, I am perfectly aware, lies at my feet a rough track to travel, and around me gather black tempests to encounter. You ran downstairs and demanded of Mrs. Fairfax some occupation. The weekly house accounts to make up or something of that sort. I think it was. I was vexed with you for getting out of my sight. Impatiently, I waited for evening when I might summon you to my presence. An unusual, to me, a perfectly new character I suspected was yours. I desired to search it deeper and know it better. You entered the room with a look and air at once shy and independent. You were quaintly dressed, much as you are now. I made you talk. Ere long, I found you full of strange contrasts. Your garb and manner were restricted by rule. Your air was often diffident and altogether that of one refined by nature, but absolutely unused to society and a good deal afraid of making herself disadvantageously conspicuous by some solecism or blunder. Yet when addressed, you lifted a keen, a daring, and glowing eye to your interlocutor's face. There was penetration and power in each glance you gave. When plied by close questions, you found ready and round answers. Very soon, you seemed to get used to me. I believe you felt the existence of sympathy between you and your grim and a cross master, Jane, for it was astonishing to see how quickly a certain pleasant ease tranquilized your manner. Snarl as I would, you showed no surprise, fear, or annoyance, or displeasure at my moroseness. You watched me and now and then smiled at me with a simple yet sagacious grace I cannot describe. I was at once content and stimulated with what I saw. I liked what I had seen and wished to see more. Yet for a long time I treated you distantly and sought your company rarely. I was an intellectual epicure and wished to prolong the gratification of making this novel and piquant acquaintance. Besides, I was for a while troubled with a haunting fear that if I handled the flower freely, its bloom would fade. The sweet charm of freshness would leave it. I did not then know that it was no transitory blossom, but rather the radiant resemblance of one cut in an indestructible gem. Moreover, I wished to see whether you would seek me if I shunned you, but you did not. You kept in the schoolroom as still as your own desk and easel. If by chance I met you, you passed me as soon, and with little token of recognition was consistent with respect. Your habitual expression in those days, Jane, was a thoughtful look, not despondent, for you were not sickly, but not buoyant, for you had little hope and no actual pleasure. I wondered what you thought of me, or if you ever thought of me, and resolved to find this out. I resumed my notice of you. There was something glad in your glance and genial in your manner when you conversed. I saw you had a social heart. It was the science schoolroom. It was the tedium of your life that made you mournful. I permitted myself the delight of being kind to you. Kindness stirred emotion soon. Your face became soft in expression, your tones gentle. I liked my name pronounced by your lips in a grateful, happy accent. I used to enjoy a chance meeting with you, Jane, at this time. There was a curious hesitation in your manner. You glanced at me with a slight trouble, a hovering doubt. You did not know what my caprice might be, whether I was going to play the master and be stern, or the friend and be benignant. I was now too fond of you too often to stimulate the first women. When I stretched my hand out cordially, such bloom and light and bliss rose to your young, wistful features. I had much ado often to avoid straining you, then and there, to my heart.
Don't talk any more of those days, sir.
I interrupted furtively, dashing away some tears from my eyes. His language was torture to me, for I knew what I must do, and do soon, and all these reminiscences and these revelations of his feelings only made my work more difficult.
No, Jane. What necessity is there to dwell on the past when the present is so much surer, the future so much brighter?
I shuddered to hear this infatuated assertion.
You see now how the case stands, do you not? After youth and manhood passed in unutterable misery and half dreary solitude, I have for the first time found what I can truly love. I have found you. You are my sympathy, my better self, my good angel. I am bound to you with a strong attachment. I think you good, gifted, lovely. A fervent, a solemn passion is conceived in my heart. It leans to you, draws you to my center and spring of life, wraps my existence about you, and kindling in pure, powerful flame, fuses you and me in one. It was because I felt and knew this that I resolved to marry you. To tell me that I already had a wife is empty mockery. You know now that I had but a hideous demon. I was wrong to attempt to deceive you, but I feared a stubbornness that exists in your character. I feared early instilled prejudice. I wanted to have you safe before hazarding confidences. This was cowardly. I should have appealed to your nobleness and magnanimity at first, as I do now, open to you plainly my life of agony, describe to you my hunger and thirst after a higher and worthier existence, shown to you, not my resolution, that word is weak, but my resistless bent to love faithfully and well, where I am faithfully and well loved in return. Then should I have asked you to accept my pledge of fidelity and to give me yours, Jane. Give it me now.
A pause.
Why are you silent, Jane?
I was an experiencing ordeal. A hand of fiery iron grasped my vitals. Terrible moment full of struggle, blackness burning. Not a human being that ever lived could wish to be loved better than I was loved. And him who thus loved me, I absolutely worshipped. And I must renounce love and idol. One drear word comprised my intolerable duty. Depart.
Jane, you understand what I want of you. Just this promise. I will be yours, Mr. Rochester.
Mr. Rochester, I will not be yours.
Another. Excuse me.
Jane.
Another silence.
Jane.
Recommenced he with a gentleness that broke me down with grief and turned me stone cold with ominous terror. For this still voice was the pant of a lion rising.
Jane, do you mean to go one way in the world and to let me go another?
I do.
Jane, do you mean it now?
I do.
And now?
Softly kissing my forehead and cheek.
I do.
Extricating myself from restraint rapidly and completely. Sorry.
Oh, no, that was my fault. Oh, Jane, this is bitter. This is wicked. It would not be wicked to love me.
It would to obey you.
A wild look raised his brows. Crossed his features, he rose, but he forbore yet. I laid my hand on the back of a chair for support. I shook, I feared, but I resolved.
One instant, Jane. Give one glance to my horrible life when you are gone. All happiness will be torn away with you. What then is left? For a wife I have but the maniac upstairs. As well might you refer me to some corpse in yonder churchyard. What shall I do, Jane? Where turn for a companion and for some hope?
Do as I do. Trust in God and yourself. Believe in heaven. Hope to meet again there.
Then you will not yield?
No.
Then you condemn me to live wretched and die accursed?
His voice rose.
I advise you to live sinless, and I wish you to die tranquil.
Then you snatch love and innocence from me? You fling me back on lust for a passion, vice for an occupation?
Mr. Rochester, I no more assign this fate to you than I grasp at it for myself. We were born to strive and endure, you as well as I. Do so. You will forget me before I forget you.
You make me a liar by such language. You sully my honor. I declared I could not change. You tell me to my face I shall change soon? And what a distortion in your judgment. What perseverity in your ideas is proved by your conduct. Is it better to drive a fellow creature to despair than to transgress a mere human law, no man being injured by the breach? For you have neither relatives nor acquaintances whom you need fear to offend by living with me.
This was true. And while he spoke, my very conscience and reason turns traitor against me and charged him with crimes in resisting him. They spoke almost as loud as feeling, and that clamored wildly. Oh, comply, it said. Think of his misery, think of his danger, look at his state. When left alone, remember his headlong nature. Consider the recklessness following on despair. Soothe him, save him, love him. Tell him that you love him and will be his. Who in the world cares for you? And who will be injured by what you do? Still indomitable was the reply.
I care for myself. The more solitary, the more friendless, the more unsustained I am, the more I will respect myself. I will keep the law given by God, sanctioned by man. I will hold to the principles conceived by me when I was sane and not mad as I am now. Laws and principles are not for the times when there is no temptation. They are for such moments as this, when body and soul rise in mutiny against their rigor. Stringent are they, inviolate they shall be. If at my individual convenience I might break them, what would be their worth? They have a worth, so I have always believed, and if I cannot believe it now, it is because I am insane, quite insane, with my veins running fire and my heart beating faster than I can count its throbs. Preconceived opinions, foregone determinations are all I have at this hour to stand by. There I plant my foot.
I did. Mr. Rochester, reading my countenance, saw I had done so. His fury was wrought to the highest. He must yield to it. For a moment, whatever followed, he crossed the floor and seized my arm and grasped my waist. He seemed to devour me with his flaming glance. Physically, I felt at the moment powerless, as stubble exposed to the draught and glow of a furnace. Mentally, I still possessed my soul, and with it the certainty of ultimate safety. The soul, fortunately, has an interpreter, often an unconscious, but still a truthful interpreter in the eye. My eye rose to his, and while I looked in his fierce face, I gave an involuntary sigh. His grip was painful, and my overtaxed strength almost exhausted.
Never,
He said he as he ground his teeth.
never was anything at once so frail and so indomitable. A mere reed she feels in my hand.
And he shook me with the force of his hold.
I could bend her with my finger and thumb, and what good would it do if I bent, if I uptore, if I crushed her? Consider that eye. Consider the resolute, wild, free thing looking out of it, defying me with more than courage, with a stern triumph. Whatever I do with its cage, I cannot get at it, the savage, beautiful creature. If I tear, if I rend the slightest prison, my outrage will only let the captive loose. Conqueror I might be of the house, but the inmate would escape to heaven before I could call myself possessor of its clay dwelling place. And it is you, spirit, with will and energy and virtue and purity that I want, not alone your brittle frame. Of yourself you could come with soft flight and nestle against my heart. If you would, seized against your will, you would elude the grasp like an essence. You will vanish ere I inhale your fragrance. Oh, Jane, come, come, Jane, come.
I'm sorry.
We are at the top of 259. Sorry, not 259.
I'm sorry. Okay,
Yes.
all right. My bad. Okay. As he said this, he released me from his clutch and only looked at me. The look was far worse to resist than the frantic strain. Only an idiot, however, would have succumbed now. I had dared, and baffled in his fury, I must elude his sorrow. I retired to the door.
You are going, Jane.
I am going, sir.
You are leaving me.
Yes.
You will not come. You will not be my comforter, my rescuer. My deep love, my wild woe, my frantic prayer are all nothing to you?
What unutterable pathos was in his voice. How hard it was to reiterate firmly.
I am going
Jane!
to Rochester.
Withdraw then, I consent, but remember, you leave me here in anguish. Go up to your own room, think over all I have said, and Jane, cast a glance on my sufferings. Think of me.
He turned away. He threw himself on his face on the sofa.
Oh, Jane, my hope, my love, my life.
Broken anguish from his lips, then came a deep, strong sob. I had already gained the door, but reader, I walked back as determinedly as I had retreated. I knelt down by him. I turned his face on the cushion to me. I kissed his cheek. I smoothed his hair with my hand.
God bless you, my dear master. God keep you from harm and wrong, direct you, solace you, reward you well for your past kindness to me.
Little Jane's love would have been my best reward. Without it, my heart is broken. But Jane will give me her love, yes, nobly, generously.
Up the blood rushed to his face, for that flashed the fire from his eyes. Erect he sprang. He held his arms up, and I evaded the embrace, and at once quitted the room.
Farewell.
Was the cry of my heart as I left him. Despair added.
Farewell forever.
That night I never thought to sleep, but a slumber fell on me as soon as I lay in bed. I was transported in thoughts to the scenes of childhood. I dreamt I lay in the red room at Gateshead, that the night was dark and that my mind impressed with strange fears. The light that long ago had struck me in this syncope, recalled in this vision, seemed glidingly to mount the wall and trembling to pause in the center of the obscured ceiling. I lifted up my head to look. The roof resolved to clouds high and dim. The gleam was such as the moon imparts to vapors she is about to sever. I watched her come, watched with the strangest anticipation, as though some word of doom were to be written on her disk. She broke forth as never moon yet births from cloud. A hand first penetrated the sable folds, and then waved them away. Then, not a moon, but a white human form shone in the azure, inclining a glorious brow earthward. It gazed and gazed on me. It spoke to my spirit. Immeasurably distant was the tone, yet so near. It whispered in my heart, my daughterly temptation.
Mother, I will.
So I answered after I had walked from the trance-like dream. It was yet night, but July nights are short. Soon after midnight, dawn comes. It cannot be too early to commence the task I had to fulfill, thought I. I rose, I was dressed, for I had taken off nothing but my shoes. I knew where to find in my drawers some linen, a locket, a ring. In seeking these articles, I encountered the beads of a pearl necklace Mr. Rochester had forced me to accept a few days before. I left that. It was not mine. It was the visionary bride's who had melted in air. The other articles I made in a parcel, my purse containing 20 shillings. It was all I had. I put in my pocket. I tied on my straw bonnet, pinned my shawl, took the parcel in my slippers, which I would not put on yet, and stole from the room.
Farewell, kind Mrs. Fairfax.
I whispered as I glided past her door.
Farewell, my darling Adele.
I said as I glanced towards the nursery. No thought could be admitted of entering to embrace her. I had to deceive a fine ear. For aught I knew, it might not be listening. I would have gone past Mr. Rochester's chamber without a pause, but my heart momentarily stopping its beat at that threshold, my foot was forced to stop also. No sleep was there. The inmate was walking restlessly from wall to wall, and again he sighed while I listened. There was a heaven, a temporary heaven, in this room for me if I chose. I had to but go in and to say,
Mr. Rochester, I will love you and live with you through life till death.
And a fount of rapture would spring to my lips. I thought of this. That kind master who could not sleep now was waiting with impatience for day. He would send for me in the morning. I should be gone. He would have me sought for vainly. He would feel himself forsaken, his love rejected. He would suffer, perhaps grow desperate. I thought of this too. My hand moved towards the lock. I caught it back and glided on. Surely I wound my way downstairs. I knew what I had to do, and I did it mechanically. I sought the key of the side door in the kitchen. I sought too a phial of oil and a feather. I oiled the key in the lock. I got some water. I got some bread, for perhaps I should have to walk far, and for my strength, sorely shaken of late, must not break down. All this I did without one sound. I opened the door, passed out, shut it softly. Dim dawn glimmered in the yard. The great gates were closed and locked, but a wicket in one of them was only latched. Though through that I departed, it too I shut, and now I was out of Thornfield. A mile off beyond the fields lay a road which stretched in a contrary direction to Millcott, a road I had never travelled, but often noticed and wondered where it led. Thither I bent my steps. No reflection was to be allowed now, not one glance to be cast back, not even one forward. Not one thought was to be given either to the past or the future. The first was a page so heavenly sweet, so deadly sad, that to read one line of it would dissolve my courage and break down my energy. The last was an awful blank, something like the world when the deluge was gone by. I skirted fields and hedges and lanes till after sunrise. I believe it was a lovely summer morning. I know my shoes, which I had put on when I left the house, were soon wet with dew. But I looked neither to rising sun nor smiling sky, nor awakening nature. He who is taken out to pass through a fair scene to the scaffold thinks not of flowers that smile on the road, but of the block and axe edge, of the disseverment of bone and vein, and of the grave gaping at the end. And I thought of dear flight and homeless wandering, and oh, I thought of what I had left. I could not help it. I thought of him now, in his room, watching the sunrise, hoping I should soon come to say I would stay with him and be his. I longed to be his. I panted to return. It was not too late. I could yet spare him the bitter pang of bereavement. As yet my flight, I was sure, was undiscovered. I could go back and be his comforter, his pride, his redeemer from misery, perhaps from ruin. Oh, that fear of his self-abandonment, far worse than my abandonment, how it goaded me. It was a barbed arrowhead in my breast. It tore me when I tried to extract it. It sickened me, remember, thrust it farther in. Birds began singing in a break in copse. Birds were faithful to their mates. Birds were emblems of love. What was I? In the midst of my pain of hard and frantic effort of principle, I abhorred myself. I had no solace from self-approbation, none even from self-respect. I had injured, wounded, left my master. I was hateful in my own eyes. Still I could not turn, nor retrace one step. God must have led me on. As to my own will or conscience, impassioned grief had trampled one and stifled the other. I was weeping wildly as I walked along my solitary way. Fast, fast, I went like one delirious. A weakness beginning inwardly, extending to the limbs, seized me, and I fell. I lay on the ground some minutes, pressing my face to the wet turf. I had some hope that here I should die, but I was soon up crawling forwards on my hands and knees, and then again raised to my feet, as eager and as determined as ever to reach the road. When I got there, I was forced to sit to rest me under the hedge. And when I sat, I heard wheels and saw a coach come on. I stood up and lifted my hand. It stopped. I asked where it was going. The driver named a place a long way off, where I was sure Mr. Rochester had no connections. I asked for what sum he would take me there. He said 30 shillings. I answered, I had but 20. Well, he would try to make it do. He further gave me leave to go into the inside, as the vehicle was empty. I entered and shut in, and it rolled on its way. Gentle reader, may you never feel what I then felt. May your eyes never shed such stormy, scalding, heart-wrung tears as poured from mine. May you never appeal to heaven in prayers so hopeless and so agonized as in that hour left my lips, for never may you, like me, dread to be the instrument of evil to what you wholly love.
That was fantastic. What a place to end for the day.
I
Great job.
Gosh, I was fighting tears that whole last page.
I love it when I don't have a part, because I can just sit here and cry as much as I want, which is what I do when I read the novel too. So thank you, everyone. And thank you to our performers who had to leave. I do want to have a little discussion with you. But first, a reminder of why we're all here. It's to save the Honnersfield Library and to try to bring these fantastic literary treasures that have not been seen by the public during any of our lifetimes, and try to get them into museums and libraries where we can see them and scholars can access them, and basically return these documents to the homes where they were created. So if you can donate financially, we have links in all of our former videos on YouTube for our Bring the Brontes Home GoFundMe campaign and the Friends of the National Libraries Big Give Big campaign. All of the money from either place will ultimately go to the Friends of the National Libraries to try to bring these documents into the hands of the public. So thank you, friends, for doing this. I've stolen my husband's hat now. This is from Yorkshire and it's mine now. Thank you. So you all did great. Do you want to share any of your big feelings or thoughts about this?
So it's interesting, I was mainly listening, and I read this book, in school when I was a kid, and I think I focused on, at that time, the horror of this, hag in the attic, and it is interesting to hear it now and to think what it says about how we treat people with mental illness, with who need accommodations, and also just the sheer amount of gaslighting that goes on in this section. That the first when Jane comes to Rochester and is very distressed, he keeps being like, "Well, you're just being hysterical," and then this continuing this these lies that are at the core of the relationship and the kind of emotional manipulation that goes on when she repeatedly says, "No, I need to go," and he's like, "But I need you, but I need this."
Yeah.
And I think that landed in a different way for me now as an adult than when I was before any kind of relationship, child, teenager.
Well, it's very much about women. I mean, when I was in grad school and we were reading these books, we were all reading Sandra Gilbert's The Mad Woman in the Attic, which was so fascinating to me because I don't think I would have come to that on my own. But oh yeah, if someone's hysterical or angry, even if there's a reason, at least metaphorically, shut her up in the attic. Just shut her up. Make her stop talking, which is really fascinating. But I just think the Brontes are they're just mind-boggling to me. I mean, I constantly think about, they were so young and they were living in this sort of, forlorn place with no real stimulation except, I guess, the library that I guess their father had provided to them. And the imagination of these children is unbelievable. Where the talent and the imagination is it's just incredible. I had read Jane Eyre a long time ago, but I didn't read, I don't know why, I didn't read Wuthering Heights until I was in my early 30s. And I felt really happy to be reading it then because it brought me back to what it was like to feel very young and in love, that intense, passionate thing. And I thought, wow, I don't get to feel that as somebody in my early 30s. And that novel also they all knocked me out. I mean, every single thing any of them has written, they're like a miracle. I don't know how they're like otherworldly, the Brontes.
Well, they really were a miracle. I think that, well, golly, a couple things. Well, I was thinking very much as I was reading this thing, which I think my part was longer than Hamlet and Bill's was longer than Richard III times 2. It was really long. Oh my gosh, it was like, breathe. But that I was thinking very much because, of course, as I told people in the beginning, I'm writing a novel about the Brontes, and the incredible passionate, I believe, sensual, physical love she felt for her Brussels, the head of the school there when she was teaching in Brussels, and he kind of played around with her feelings, and I think the feelings for I think Rochester and Jane's speeches to Rochester and stuff are very much from this totally sublimated passion, because it couldn't come out. Another thing was, I don't know when the laws changed, that if somebody was that crazy that their partner did not have to remain yoked to them forever. I mean, not she's a nuisance, put her in the attic, not that kind, but really crazy. I mean, because the Christian laws then, her response to the Christian laws of I will go and leave this man alone with nothing in the world. I just, I think that's really rather stupid, but was very much 1846 or whatever it was when they were published. 1846 virtuous morality, which anyway, those are the two things. And I totally never thought, Amber, I would have such an opportunity as I had today to read this book that I discovered also as a very young woman in my teens, and read it, was sort of like, oh, this is love, this torture, torment, how marvelous, and I never thought in my life I would be together with a bunch of other talented people and reading these things out loud, which I read so often by myself. So thank you, everybody. Fantastic.
It's really thrilling. Really thrilling.
I read Wuthering Heights in high school. That was not my only Bronte experience until now. I never read Jane Eyre. I like it. I feel like we read a good part of the novel.
We did.
We got a particularly good part of it. When you think back to reading the whole novel, you think back to this part maybe.
Yeah, I put some thought into my Rochesters who I reached out to read, because today's readings have all been very Rochester centric, and he is not the romantic hero that we want him to be by today's standards. When I read this as a teenager, he was presented as a romantic hero, and I would be horrified if my children ever wanted to date a person who treats their love interest as he treats Jane. And
right. And that's why you catch very, very good looking people to read Rochester, to sort of have that, like, oh, you think he's going to be one thing and then he turns out to be something else.
Well, that's why I got readers who are very kind in real life, primarily. So those of you who don't know Bill, he would be mortified to say any of the things that Rochester said to anyone in this room if he wasn't reading a script.
That's true, actually. I was reading this and I'm like, oh my God, was it really okay to say these things back then?
That's why that's part of the brilliance of this novel. The characters are so, layered. I mean, they're not what you would expect. And, when Rochester tells Jane, she's so fragile, he could break her, but she's also so stubborn and so strong. It's a fantastic character. And he too, he's not the typical romantic character, but you understand why she's attracted to him. You totally get it. It's a very real, attraction, and that's so much more real.
I do like his willingness to admit when he's wrong, like misleading her.
He's had a hell of a life. I mean, his family wanted him to have money, so they shackled him to this nasty woman, and he was shackled forever. And so he kind of ran around trying to make do. He didn't have a very good. A very good life. I don't know, probably Amber knows, at least maybe the rest of you know, that Charlotte was trying to sell her best novel called The Professor, and nobody was buying it. And she went to Manchester with her father. Her father had to have cataract surgery, and he had to stay. And then you had to stay in a dark room for 3 weeks. And so she stayed with him. And as she stayed with him, this novel came to her. And so as he slept, and she got a little light in the room and wrote 300 pages. And when she came home, she put it under the bed and got on with her life and didn't really think too much about it until the publisher who rejected The Professor said to her, "But we'd be willing to look at another work." And she quickly got out Jane Eyre and sent it off to him, finished it, sent it off to him, and he took it at once. So it was quite a sort of an accident. Everything that happened to them was kind of like accidents. It wasn't premeditated. I'm going to have a great career. It just was total accident, you know. And she was someone a little bit like the, what was her name, Sarah Boyle, who won, what was that, American Idol or something, that can't remember what that show is. And this unknown person was suddenly in the limelight.
Susan Boyle.
Yeah, Susan Boyle, and was suddenly in the limelight, and everybody knew who she was, and it was the kind of the 1846, I think, version of that kind of thing. That, you know, he was this little woman who only had plain country done over dresses and, you know, a rotten bonnet, and she was suddenly in the middle of society. Interesting.
I recommended during an earlier segment what came to America as a movie, but I believe it was a mini series in Britain called To Walk Invisible by Sally Wright.
I think it's totally marvelous. Totally marvelous. Yeah.
It's very well done. My apologies to Branwell on his birthday because he's not portrayed in the best light in that film or series. But it is a good introduction for those who want a modern exploration of the Brontes' real lives. And it's filmed in Haworth, if nothing else. It's a virtual tour to the town that the Brontes were from.
It's wonderful, yeah.
And this,
they reproduced the inside of the house because they couldn't film. It was too. It's tiny. It really isn't very big, and so they reproduced it somewhere. But exactly, I mean, the curator was astonished. She said, "My gosh, you know."
And what was great about that is it created lines of sight that don't exist in the current parsonage since it was rebuilt. And so you could see in that film how the kitchen is related to the main rooms of the house and how they might have interacted in that environment. It's fantastic. If you all haven't seen it in the audience, I recommend it so much.
Totally wonderful. I love the actors. I too. I mean, I think Jonathan Pryce is the dad, Patrick, and he's just amazing. He's just brilliant.
What's the name of the series?
To Walk Invisible.
Say that again?
To Walk Invisible. It's a line from Charlotte. I believe Charlotte. I hope I'm not miscrediting her. And since I have you here, and we have a very high percentage of Shakespeare fans in the virtual Zoom room at the moment, what do you think about seeing Shakespeare kind of stuck in with a novel written several hundred years after his death?
I think it's exciting to see the impact that he had on society and the impact that he apparently had on Charlotte, that she's making all these references to Shakespeare. Maybe she's assuming that we're going to get them. Maybe she's not, and just enjoys making the references. But in that beginning section, there were three of them. To gild refined gold is from King John. All that glisters isn't gold is from Merchant of Venice. And cudgel thy brains is from Hamlet.
That's so good. We had references earlier too from Rochester and Jane's dialogue, emphasizing the word doubt, like Hamlet's poem In a Letter to Ophelia. We have a reference earlier with Rochester saying, "Is that not strange?" We also have some references to wasp stings. And it's funny because when I described Rochester and Jane's relationships to one of my friends, I said, well, it's kind of like Kate and Petruchio in Taming of the Shrew. It's kind of like Beatrice and Benedict. And then reading this, I'm seeing that Charlotte had thoughts of that, or at least subconscious inklings that made it onto her page. And it's a fun thing to look for. So if you need to know more about Shakespeare, Bill's website's a place to start with shakespeareteacher.com.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I had read in one of the biographies of Shakespeare, biographies of Charlotte, that there was a Shakespeare reading group in Keighley, and she'd walk over, she and maybe her sisters, and be part of it. And I don't remember which biography it was because I've got a lot of them here, but I do remember reading that. So with the printing of these small individual books of the plays, they became very popular to everybody, and everybody was reading them. So You must be tired.
And to
Amber.
this day, some people still have reading groups.
Yes.
I know. I've heard that.
I'm in one reading group with Stephanie C and Allie. I'm in another reading group with Katrina.
So I met Katrina yesterday, and I was trying to introduce her to some of our Beers and Bard friends, and then discovered that she already knew them.
It's
So-
a very
I should
small
mention
and beautiful world.
I'm in the third reading group with Amber.
Yep. So we all know each other in one way or another. We're 1 degree of separation, I suppose. You all have been just a pleasure. Our other readers who had to leave early were fantastic. I appreciate those of you who are doing this more than once because it's a lot. So thank you, Katrina, for coming back. Bill, we're going to see you tomorrow.
Tomorrow morning.
Yeah, we'll see if the character you have tomorrow is better than Rochester or not. If Rochester has really driven you crazy today, as we've seen his arc, and you're like, I just want to read a Bronte book with a guy who doesn't tell Jane to smile, then check out The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. Yes, we are Team Anne in this room right now. And I do truly love Anne, and Tenant of Wildfell Hall is, it offers some alternatives for love interests that are unlike Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre. So it's a little bit more modern in some ways.
All right, that doesn't go well for St. John then.
Oh, St. John is, well, we'll meet him tomorrow. No
We'll meet him
spoilers.
tomorrow.
Yeah, he is the Paris to Rochester's Romeo.
Okay. That helps.
So everyone, you were fantastic. Audience members, if you were watching us. Oh,
Well, thank you.
yes, thank you. Audience members, if you've stuck with us today, please eat some food and get some drink and use the toilet because it has been a very long day. We will be back here tomorrow morning for more. Bill will be back. We'll meet some new readers. We'll have some other returning readers. It will be lots of fun. And we'll get to see how Jane's adventures end. We get to see a lot more of her. Also, some returning characters, some not returning. You have to find out. So everyone, thank you for your participation. Thank you, viewers. I'm going to end the live stream, but those of you in the room,